Great. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us here today. Before I start, I just want to acknowledge that we have tribal representatives here joining us in person, and I welcome them and thank you for coming to this meeting. So with that, I'll call this meeting of the California Strategic Growth Council to order. SGC Executive Director Lynn Bangkok Libert is not in the office. In her place, we have SGC Deputy Director of Equity and Government Transformation, Kiran Kumar. He will be representing SGC on her behalf. So with that, Matt Reed, SGC Staff Council, will now lead the roll call. Matt?
Director Acefa?
Here.
Councilmember Capretz?
Here.
Public Member Cardenas?
Here.
Sasha Kurgan, on behalf of Secretary Lourdes Castro Ramirez.
Here.
Secretary Crowfoot. Secretary Umashakin.
Present.
Secretary Ross.
Present.
Okay, 1 second. Sorry. Assistant Secretary Moises Moreno Rivera.
Here.
Thank you. Deputy Director Radhakrishna.
Present.
Chancellor Munoz.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Great, thanks, Matt. And Matt, could you please share today's public comment procedures?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to everyone joining us today in person, online, or by phone through the Zoom webinar platform, or where the meeting is being live streamed on SGC's YouTube channel or Cal EPA's live webcast. I'm here to provide some information to help guide all of us through the process for this hybrid meeting, which we have designed with the intention of maximizing access by members of the public. For those joining the webinar online via Zoom or by phone, please note that your microphone is automatically muted when you join. In order to minimize the risk of background noise, you will not be able to unmute your phone yourself. For those joining online via Zoom, please note that the webinar platform does not enable video for attendees, so we will not be able to see you. If you need technical assistance during the meeting or have a question about the meeting process, there are a few ways to contact us. If you're using the online Zoom webinar, the best way is by using the Q&A function, which several members of the SGC team will be monitoring. If you've joined by phone and have access to email, please email sgc.info@sgc.ca.gov. If you do not have access to email, you may text or call 916-634-3359. If you plan to make in-person public comment, you must fill out a comment card provided at the table near the side of the room. Please fill out the public comment card to indicate your name and which item you would like to comment on. Then please bring your comment card to the table at the front to my left with the sign for collecting public comment cards. When the chair opens the public comment period for your item, we'll read the names of 3 people that have submitted a form for that item. Please line up by the podium when I do so and in the order that I have called your name. When it is your turn to speak, I will call your name to the podium. If you plan to make remote public comment, you must be joining the meeting via Zoom, either through your desktop or phone, or by calling in by phone. To make a public comment, visit sgc.ca.gov/meetings and complete the public comment form linked there. You'll need separate forms for each item on which you wish to speak. You may complete a form at any time during the meeting. When the chair opens the public comment period for your item, we'll read the names of the individuals signed up for that item, and when you hear your name, please raise your hand. To do this online in the Zoom webinar, click the raise hand function under the participants menu. And to raise your hand by phone, press *9. When it is your turn to speak, a member of our team will unmute your microphone. If you are online, you will see a window pop up alerting you that the host is unmuting you. You'll need to click the option to approve unmute, and after that, you can begin your comment. If you are on the phone, you'll hear a recorded message alerting you that your line is unmuted. Please begin your comment, and after you hear the recorded message. If you're unable to complete the online form but would like to make a public comment, please email sgc.info@sgc.ca.gov. Each speaker will have a maximum of 2 minutes to make their remarks. A timer will be screen shared. Please monitor that and wrap up your remarks accordingly. Whether you're online or on the phone, you'll be notified when your time is up. And after that, we will mute your microphone. You do not need to take any additional action once we mute your microphone. Thank you all for your participation, and I will hand it back to the chair.
Great, thanks, Matt. We will start with now item 3, which is the approval of the October 27 meeting minutes. Members need not have been present or attended the meetings to vote on the minutes adaptation, but may abstain. We will have an opportunity for council discussion followed by public comments on the minutes. Matt? Oh,
We have no public comment on the meeting minutes.
no. Great. So I would ask for any questions from or comments from the council on the meeting minutes. Seeing none.
Move adoption of the minutes.
Chancellor Munoz. Any
Second.
Second. Secretary Ross. I'm going to do a roll call.
Thank you. Councilmember Cardenas.
Yes.
Deputy Secretary Kurgan.
Yes.
Assistant Secretary Moreno Rivera.
Yes.
Director Acefa.
Abstain.
Secretary Mashakan.
Yes.
Deputy Director Radhakrishna.
Yes.
Secretary Ross.
Yes.
Chancellor Munoz.
Aye.
Public Member Capretz.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Great. Thanks. Next, I want to welcome SGC Deputy Director of Equity and Government Transformation, Kiran Kumar, for item 4, which is the Executive Director's report. Following his presentation, we'll have the opportunity for council discussion, then followed by public comments. Kiran?
Good afternoon, Chair Acefa and members of the council. I'm honored to be here representing SGC and our Executive Director, Lynn von Koch-Liebert. In today's Executive Director's report, I'll focus on 3 key items. First, a snapshot of the consent calendar and some of the highlights, an update on the Regional Early Action Plan 2.0 program application, and then an update on the upcoming Catalyst Conference. Next slide, please. So before jumping into all of that exciting stuff, I'd first like to welcome a handful of new members to the SGC team. On CRC, welcoming Jessica Cervantes and Dora Monterosa. To the Transformative Climate Communities Program, TCC, welcoming Jess Eisen. And to our Communications and External Affairs team, welcoming Augustine Areola and Risa Jensen. Next slide, please. As we move into program updates, I wanted to share that today's consent calendar is a clear indication of an incredible amount of work that has gone in by not just SGC's program teams, but also our interagency working groups and partners to really achieve these program milestones around adopted final guidelines and awards. And so while we may be bringing quite a few items to you on the consent calendar, I just wanted to take a moment to pause and recognize the amount of work that's gone into all of these really key milestones. And then, of course, the staff reports for each of these items have a bit more information in case there's interest in going a little bit deeper. Next slide, please. So first up, the Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities team is proud to present the final AHSC Round 7 guidelines to the Council for adoption. These guidelines have been informed by over 300 different stakeholders across 12 different public meetings and convenings. The guidelines are really meant to streamline the application process, clarify policies, and really reward innovative projects that are building healthier, more equitable housing in communities. There are quite a few highlights here, but importantly, I wanted to share that the guidelines increase the project cap to $50 million per project, expand access to tribal entities and home ownership projects, and ensure an all-electric design and awarding project points to projects that improve local bus service. In terms of next steps, HCD will release the Round 7 application in NOFA for a 90-day application window, and we're expecting that NOFA to be at $750 million. Next slide, please. Next up, excitingly, the Sustainable Agricultural Lands Conservation Program is proud to present its Round 8 projects for award. SALC, as you all well know, is a state leader in conserving prime agricultural land, fighting sprawl, and mitigating greenhouse gases. Of the $105 million available for this round, staff are recommending funding 25 easement projects, 20 capacity building grants, and 3 planning grants for a total of just over $74 million. I wanted to also take a pause here to say that this is a watershed moment for this program. This funding round represents some of the most significant funding ever made available for conservation, and the team has done an incredible amount of work to get to these awards. The recommended easement projects are spread across the state in 17 different counties and comprise approximately 54,000 acres of conserved agricultural land. When completed, this suite of easements will avoid or mitigate an estimated 619,000 metric tons of carbon equivalent. Additionally, SALC is bringing staff recommendations for 3 different planning grants, including its first ever tribal entity recommended for award. And then finally, the first ever capacity grants for the program will support organizations to apply to easements down the road. And these 20 projects also have great geographic spread throughout the state, ranging from Siskiyou County all the way to San Diego. Next slide, please. So shifting gears, I also wanted to provide a quick general update on the Regional Early Action Plan Planning Grant Program, or REAP 2.0, which is an effort led by HCD in partnership with OPR, SGC, and CARB. The REAP 2.0 program is very closely aligned with the Council's Priority 3 on housing as a climate strategy that we'll get into in just a minute. For context, REAP 2.0 provides MPOs the necessary funding to help advance regional coordination and implementation of our state housing, climate, and equity goals by reducing vehicle miles traveled, accelerating infill development, and creating housing supply at all affordability levels. Most importantly, the reason we're also sharing this update to the Council is a reminder to the public that the REAP 2.0 application period is open and is closing at the end of the year on December 31st. Next slide, please. And then finally, a quick update on the SGC Catalyst Conference, which is scheduled for February 1st and 2nd of this coming year. Since we last met, the team has continued to work with our partners, including the Milken Institute, our cross-sector steering committee, key staff, and other thought leaders to both develop and refine our purpose, outcomes, and then importantly, post-conference activities and actions. As a reminder, the purpose of the conference is to convene and create a learning environment on the who, what, when, where, how, and why of Justice 40 implementation, and then also sustained investment in frontline communities in California and beyond. We also hope that the conference is a place where we can build consensus across the state on what we see as our North Star, establishing equitable, resilient communities led through resident transformation to achieve healthy, thriving communities for all. Next slide, please. And then quickly, in terms of outcomes that we've been developing and refining over this period, following the conference, we will generate and post impact papers sharing what we've heard at the conference, highlighting both challenges and opportunities for scaling investment and equitable transformation. We'll also curate and share on our website solutions that show how to accelerate and build momentum, including a hub showcasing some of SGC's own models like the TCC program or our climate change research program, as well as other tools from external partners like matchmaking portals or resources to help communities with newly available funding. And then a key outcome of the 2 days at the conference is to build awareness and drive participation in follow-up regional convenings that, as per the Council's direction, will continue after the conference to continue the conversation and momentum built at the conference. And then to tie all of this together, following the conference, the SGC team will be convening to develop, or as part of our strategic planning sessions, to develop our 4-year plan with a focus on what we heard and what was lifted up at the conference. To provide early direction on that planning, an administrative committee of the Council has been formed, comprised of Director Acefa, Secretary Castro Ramirez, and Public Member Cardenas. The administrative committee, importantly, is also in place to conduct the Executive Director's annual performance review at the right time. So just to close the ED report, wanted to share that we're all extremely excited for the conference and how the conversations, the cross-sector teams of folks who will be coming together will really help us both amplify and further the SGC mission. And so next, following Matt's reminder on public comment, we'd like to turn it over to you, Chair Estefa. Thank you.
Thank you. If anyone has public comment on this item, I would ask you to either submit your form at the front or to go to sgc.ca.gov/meetings and submit your comment form there. I'll pass it back to the chair.
Great. So we'll initiate council discussion. I just want to start by, thanking SGC staff for incredible work, especially over the last several months. And from your report, I'm, really excited about the guidelines for the affordable housing AHSC guidelines. It was long coming. It's a program that we keep working to improve. And what I'm really excited about it is it really represents comments and feedback we've heard from multiple groups, really getting the program to improve, easier to apply, address equity, all of its multi-benefit aspects of that very important program. SALT, that's sustainable agriculture. What an incredible outcome, incredible program. And those are the kinds of programs I think not only SGC could be proud of, but the state of California could be proud of. I'm really excited about that. And then the Catalyst Conference. I mean, it's one of the work that SGC does, and with a lot of your participation in this program is really to try out cutting edge ideas to address multiple benefits from climate, so economy, health, equity, in all of those. And those are all sort of new initiatives that government alone can't do it. And for SGC staff to actually pull together an idea to then, expand this to include multiple voices, the private sector, the nonprofit organizations, and expand the work in the rest of the state is a very exciting opportunity. So I'm really excited about a lot of those. And of course, a number of the reports that you provided, but those three stand out for me. So that,
Mr. Chair,
anybody? Yes.
I'll just follow up with that because obviously I'm very excited about the SALT program. And I think it's really important to note, and it's because I have the luxury of our Deputy Secretary Jameson once was at DOC and oversaw farmland conservation. This acreage equals about what we've done the previous 20 years. And I think it's just a testimony to having the consistent funding that is there. It's not only about the projects that we've been able to include this year, but it's taking a look at planning grants and the value of planning grants. And yay, we have a tribal award that's being given, and that's really, really important to really reach all parts of the state. And then having 20 capacity building, that's what will keep these kinds of programs working and improving them in every way possible, not only for our climate benefits, but for food security. So I just have to thank the staff for that and also acknowledge that for Shanna Atherton, this is her first year running the farmland conservation program. And so what a great luxury that she had of having some consistent funding, a good system in place, but I do want to acknowledge her good work on this. So thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Ross. Anyone else from council?
I don't know if this is appropriate or not, but in the hiring of staff, Agustin Arriola, who's sitting right over here in the front, I went to the same high school. He, of course, way after that I did. And he entered for me when he was in high school. And it's just so lovely to see him in this room and in this capacity. So to the SGC team, it's just, it's nice to see another familiar face from the East Coachella Valley. So welcome, Agustin.
Great, good comments. Yeah. Anyone else? Ron? Please.
So thank you for that report. What a way to end the year. These are big and important numbers, 54,000 acres, 74,750,000 for housing. And it's not just the what, it's the how, the process that we want to congratulate you on. So thanks to all SGC staff and agency partners for the participatory development of these visionary grant guidelines. It's been our staff's honor to be one of the dozens, the hundreds that participated in those many work groups and guideline developments for AHSC, TCC, CRCs, and others. I briefly want to share two other congratulations. One is to something else that's happening in the building, just to acknowledge Congratulations to the Cal EPA agency, as well as the California Air Resources Board on the release and consideration today and tomorrow of the scoping plan. Really the most ambitious of any jurisdiction on planet Earth, and really models what we're doing here in terms of cross-sector collaboration and multi-benefit, with health being one of those. And finally, just want to give a thanks to Dr. Mark Starr, who served in the role I'm sitting in today. Today is his retirement party. I'm missing it to be here. I took him out to lunch before coming, but on behalf of our agency, we want to thank Dr. Starr for representing the Cal Health and Human Services Agency at the Strategic Growth Council. Honored to be filling in his role. But again, thanks on the big numbers and the how. Great way to end the year.
Yeah, and thanks, Rohan, and especially calling on Mark Starr. And I've only known him for the last year. I have been incredibly grateful to have worked with him. He's been a sound voice on health, equity, and really sensible policies in terms of his recommendation to this council. And plus, I can't think of anybody better to actually take his place than Rohan. Rohan, thank you for being serving on this role, and your work is really consistent with what he has been actually advocating in this space. So really glad to have you here as a permanent member. Chancellor Munoz.
Oh, just very quickly, everybody's excited about the SALT program and the immensity of that, and of course housing, and remarkable. But I also want to just communicate how exciting I think the Catalyst conference will be. These kinds of activities, particularly the visibility, when people hear about what's happening with these other programs, they're obviously attracted to see what else is happening in California, and it begins to set a precedent and productive pressure for other state and leadership to say, what are we doing? Because see what's happening in that particular state. And so it beyond what it catalyzes for our own thinking, but what it ends up catalyzing nationally. And so that convening of thinkers and programs and projects, there's just no telling the kinds of innovations, not just technical innovations, but the development of relationships and partnerships that can ensue from that kind of convening, particularly if it is consistent and not once every 10 years. And so I think about the importance of that kind of aggregation of effort, desire, willingness, and intellect that uniquely occurs here in California. And I'm just reminded very quickly, this is going to sound like a plug, but the lab doesn't report to me yet. But Lawrence Livermore and its breakthrough announcement on fission. And this is being considered just a tremendous step forward in terms of the possibility of a different kind of energy that wouldn't be fossil related. That has implications for the things that we're talking about, whether it's the SALT programs, housing, but also climate. So things like this are happening in a state like California, unlike anywhere else. And the things that you are leading as part of this particular Strategic Growth Council is really beyond invaluable, not just what it purports for the moment, right, but what it catalyzes for the future.
Thank you, Chancellor. Anyone else? Lord. Thank you, Lourdes, for joining us.
Apologize for running late, but happy to be here. Thank you, Chair.
Being none, Matt will go to public comments.
There are no public comments on the Executive Director's report.
Great. So we'll now move on to item 5, which is the consent calendar. The consent calendar is for routine and non-controversial business. And today there are 4 items on the calendar: affordable housing and sustainable communities, round 7 guidelines, sustainable agriculture lands conservation, round 8 awards, transformative climate communities, round 4 guidelines, amendments. This is focused on advanced pay. And then finally, the sustainable agriculture lands conservation rounds 5, 6, and 7 guidelines amendments focused on grant extension waivers. So council members, are there any questions from on this consent calendar? Or if not, Is there a motion and a second before taking public comments?
Sure.
Yes.
We did want, our agency just wanted to say thank you to the staff that got to work with us on these guidelines. I know there was a lot of back and forth, and it was just really great opportunity for a subset of the key staff to work with this with the Affordable Housing Sustainable Communities team. So we're just very appreciative and looking forward to this collaboration moving forward and future guidelines. So thank you.
Further, Ross? Now, any motion and second?
I'll make the motion that we approve this consent calendar items. Thank you.
I'll second. So there's a motion and second.
And we have 15 public comments on this item. You can begin to take those as soon as you're ready.
Sure. Let's go ahead with the public comments. We'll take public comments now.
Okay. I will begin the public comment period with in-person comment and by reading the names of the first 3 people that have signed up to comment on this item, which is the consent calendar on the agenda. We have approximately 4 in-person public comments, and we'll begin with, in the order of Dr. Kevin Tyson, Steph Tavares Bueller, and Sandra Nakagawa. If you could approach the podium in that order.
Hello, everyone.
Oh.
Hi, I'm Dr. Kevin Tyson.
Before you begin,
Tracy, I'm sorry.
before you begin, ask that you use the microphone,
Great,
and we'll
thank you.
have the timer set up to guide comment.
My kids might want to know where I can get one of these timers, because if it can help mute me, I think that'd be great.
Just get a little closer to the mic.
Thank you all so much. Once again, I'm Dr. Kevin Tyson. So nice to meet you all. Thank you so much for the vote. This is Mrs. Tracy Ellison from the Solano Land Trust. I've come, and certainly both of us want to speak, and so hopefully we have enough minutes for all of the talk. But I just wanted to say thank you all so very, very much for all of your hard work, for your consideration. My wife and I, we are the owners of the farm in Solano County that you all helped to approve just a few moments ago, and so we thank you for that. I'd like to thank the SALT team for all of their help and hard work. Of course, Tracy and her team's hard work towards this end. Dr. Bottoms and Mr. Stocking are here with me, and they've also helped to great ends. This grant is going to help to do wonderful things for us. It is going to help to hopefully prevent the climate disaster that's unfolding, but also help to keep this farm in perfect condition and keep it as a working farm forever. And so I just wanted to say thank you, and thanks for everything that you're doing in the state. I tell people everywhere I go, no need to move. California is the greatest state in the world. And so thanks again. Tracy, thank you.
Dr. Tyson, thank you. Chair and council members, thank you so much for your comments earlier. Secretary Ross and a few others used the word consistent funding. And this is my 4th opportunity to stand in front of the council and say thank you. And it really comes back to that consistency. 12 years at Solano Land Trust and all of the Land Trust, the work that we do takes time. It takes time meeting and partnering and having landowners understand this opportunity that's been provided through conservation easement work. And then the impact, not only at the land trust and the landowner level, but then to hear the comments today. So I just want to say thank you from the land trust level, the landowner partnership, that consistency in that funding is truly, like I said, I've been up here 4 times in front of you with this opportunity, and I really, really appreciate the continued effort and the support that you have provided. Solano Land Trust, myself, we invite you out to the properties, open door, give us a call, and we'd love to have you out to a property for a site visit. I also want to thank the SGC staff. We don't get to work with them as closely, but the communications are open and available. And certainly you mentioned Shauna and the Department of Conservation staff, none better to work with. So again, thank you. And Doctor, thank you for attending.
Thank you very much. If we could have Steph Tavares Bueller, Sandra Nakagawa, and Lynn Overtree please come to the podium, please.
My name is Steph Tavares Bueller. I'm the Senior Acquisition Specialist at the Sonoma County Ag Preservation and Open Space District. Chairman Acefa and members of the council, thanks for the opportunity to speak today and your support for the SALC program. I'm representing the McClellan Dairy Agricultural Conservation Easement Project that's getting SALC funding today. The McClellan Dairy is a thriving multi-generational dairy in the heart of the Two Rock Valley, the gateway to Bodega Bay. You may have enjoyed passing it on your way to the many parks and beaches in Marin and Sonoma counties. You've probably know it better through its milk and yogurt, which it sells through Organic Valley. Very delicious stuff. In addition to those delicious products, it also provides really important habitat in that part of our state. It's got the upper reaches of Stemple Creek that's well vegetated through a restoration project they did about 15 years ago with a group called STRAW, which is students coming out and learning how to do restoration work with their teachers. They're also really involved in work to improve their environmental footprint and reduce their carbon load. And the money from this conservation easement is going to be reinvested into that work for the next generation of this dairy. The ongoing availability of this funds was critical to the success of this project. We've been working with this family for a long time, and we just really appreciate having a reliable source of funding to come to. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Sandra Nakangawa.
Hi, I'm Sandra Nakagawa. I'm the Policy Director at the California Climate and Agriculture Network, also known as CalCAN. We ally our comments with our land trust partners, and would also just like to applaud the state, the Strategic Growth Council, all of you here today, and Department of Conservation staff for their continued leadership and sustainable ag land conservation. With this latest round of awards, we're especially excited to see the inclusion of capacity building grants for the first time, and also to see planning grants make it to regions of the state that have historically been underserved, including the southern San Joaquin Valley and San Diego. I'd like to thank the staff who make this happen, and our partners at Land Trust, the farmers and ranchers who put their land into conservation easements to make a more sustainable future for all of us. Thank you.
Our final in-person comment is Lynn Overtree.
Oh, just that one. Okay. I'm sorry. I was confused about the timer. My name is Lynn Overtree. I'm with San Benito Agricultural Land Trust, and it is an absolute honor to be here. Thank you so much for approving the grants, the SALT grants. We are specifically being awarded a capacity grant. I'm going to tell you just a brief little story to illustrate how valuable that is. I was on a call Tuesday that was organized by one of our partners, Peninsula Open Space Trust, and talking about property that's for sale on the Pajaro River, and all the partners that were national agencies and local agencies agreed that it was really important. And there's been a lot of Pajaro River work, but it's all been done on the Santa Clara side. Almost none is on the San Benito side. And San Benito County was the second fastest growing county in the last census from 2010 to 2020. And yet we only have 67,000 people. So our asset of having this vast land and low population is also a liability in that we just don't have the human and financial resources to manage this growth. And so when we came back to this call at the end, they were discussing who could do what. And a lot of the organizations were willing to step up with some potential bridge financing to help, but everyone agreed that it needed to be done by a local group who understood the local capacities, the local culture, knew the people individually, and that would be San Benito Agricultural Land Trust. But with only one staff person, we are really running thin. It's really, really hard for us to get the work done that needs to be done. And so this capacity building grant is just a lifesaver. So I thank all of you for the work you do and for the kind words you've said. And I look forward to being back with a SALT acquisition project in the future. Thank you very much.
That's it for in-person public comment. We will move to virtual. We have 11 virtual commenters signed up. When you hear your name, please raise your hand in Zoom. You can do this by clicking the raise hand under the participants menu, which you can find at the bottom of your screen on the Zoom platform, or by pressing *9 if you're joining by phone. Please raise your hand as soon as I call your name. Our first virtual commenter on the consent calendar is Ted Dallas. Ted, are you with us?
Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you. Go. You may begin your comment.
Hello, my name is Ted. I'm here with my parents, Ken and Adela Morrison, and we are representing the Waltz Turner Ranch. We would like to thank you all for your time and consideration. Keeping this as a working cattle ranch means everything to my parents and I. This ranch has been the family since 1960, and with your help, we can continue raising cattle and continue to hand the reins off to the next generation. I have 3 young boys. Teddy is 8, Bradley is 6, and Rowan is 4 months old. And Teddy and Bradley are already eager to be stewards of this land. When they're not in school, they're out with me working and pretty much just enjoying the ranch. And they both often speak on how they plan to go off to college, only to find a beautiful wife to bring back to the ranch and start their own families. I'm very proud of my boys, and I love my parents so much for making this unique way of life for them possible. Once again, thank you. Words really cannot express how much we appreciate this opportunity and all your hard work. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Lauren Miller.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you. You may begin your comment.
Hi, this is Lauren Miller, Conservation Director with Sierra Foothill Conservancy, a local land trust serving Mariposa, Madera, Fresno, and Eastern Merced counties. Just 18 short months ago, I had the pleasure of meeting Ken and Adela Morrison and their son Ted for the very first time at the Waltz Turner Ranch. And at that time, they're on the brink of losing 10,361 acres of their land, their legacy, and their cattle operation. And thanks to the support of the Department of Conservation and a unique partnership between Sierra Foothill Conservancy, the Nature Conservancy, Legacy Works, and the Land Trust of the Land Conservancy of San Luis Obispo, we're less than 2 years away from permanently protecting 16 square miles of pristine working rangeland, stretching from the vernal pool grasslands of Merced County into the oak woodland of Mariposa County. The protection of the Waltz Turner Ranch Conservation Easement will connect thousands of acres of already protected public and private land to create a 50,000 acre corridor of conserved working rangeland. And SFC could not be more excited and overwhelmed with joy that the Morrison family has chosen to make this momentous decision. It'll be a milestone for SFC, the largest acquisition we've had to date. And we just want to thank the Department of Conservation staff for their help, their support, their expertise, their work ethic, and to the council for consistent amounts of money and funding that help us continue to bring these projects to you. Thank you so much for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Jody Helmuth. Jody, are you with us?
Yes, can you hear me?
We can. You may begin your comment.
Hi, I'm Jody Helmuth, and I am a single woman farmer in Fresno County. I'm passionate about the land I own and the impact it has on my community. So I wanted to thank the work of the Strategic Growth Council for protecting our California farms. I'm currently working with California Farmland and Trust, and I appreciate all the support that you have also given me. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jody. Our next comment is from Zinat Hassan.
Hello, my name is Zinat Hassan, and I'm a staff attorney at Disability Rights California. We're a statewide nonprofit that protects and advances the rights of people with disabilities. We want to thank the Council for incorporating parts of the MHP guidelines into the Round 7 AHSC guidelines. These guidelines include tenant and fair housing protections that are critical for housing equity and stability. We want to commend the Council for adopting these protections, and we hope other housing programs follow suit. However, these guidelines fall short of meeting the transportation needs of the disability community. DRC provided comments on accessibility and discrimination issues during the public comment period, and we're concerned to see the final guidelines do not address those issues. We support transit-oriented development and active transportation as strategies to address climate change, but SGC needs to acknowledge and engage with the fact that most public transit systems utterly fail to provide equitable and accessible service to disabled people, and that so many of our sidewalks are inaccessible to people who use wheelchairs and other mobility devices. Unless these guidelines are revised, AHSC is going to be yet another public program that fails to provide equal access to disabled people because of the program's focus on inaccessible modes of travel. Having said all that, I do want to acknowledge that staff has been very courteous and responsive in their communications with us, and we appreciate their willingness to engage with these issues. We ask that next year SGC engage a broader cross-section of the disability community and engage stakeholders much earlier in the process so that future guidelines will be better crafted to meet the needs of disabled people. DRC is available to provide technical assistance on this and to connect staff to people who are directly impacted by these policies. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is JT Herichmak.
Hi there, good afternoon. My name is JT Herichmak. I am with NPH, the Nonprofit Housing Association of Northern California. I want to thank you for the robust input process that staff has put into place for ASIC and this round 7. We felt very heard and we appreciated many of the changes that were made throughout the process to protect against some unintended consequences for our members and for affordable housing production at large. One request that I would like to clarify is the anti-displacement section, which is now 107G. The round 7 draft that's up for discussion today actually takes a step backwards from earlier versions. The first round 7 version offered the option of meeting this requirement by having a community-based developer as the junior development partner. And in our comments, we asked that community-based developers satisfy this criteria whether or not they were the junior or a lead developer. But now in the current version, that has been removed entirely, and now you are not allowed to check this box essentially with a community-based developer, even if they are just the junior developer. So if you are in a place in your process to consider reinstating that previous language, the language that supports a community-based developer serving as a junior developer, I would encourage that you do that. If you're not at a place in this process right now, then I would love to talk more with staff about future rounds and other ways that we can support community-based developers in future rounds of ASIC. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Sarah Scruggs.
Good afternoon. My name is Sarah Scruggs from the Northern California Land Trust, a community land trust established in 1973 in South Berkeley. CLTs permanently own the land underneath housing to ensure long-term affordability. As a nonprofit that has received a $1 million California Energy Commission design grant to develop 100% zero net energy permanently affordable homeownership project for extremely low income to low income households, we'd like to make the following comments to the final guidelines. We appreciate the intent to prioritize disadvantaged communities and are concerned about unintended consequences. Our South Berkeley site is located in a non-DAC census tract, but used to be a very racially diverse community that experienced massive displacement when the Ashby-Bart station was constructed. In 1990, the Black population was 47% and fell to 17.6% by 2017. And we believe the DAC prioritization in this area could further exacerbate geographic segregation that has been intensified by gentrification. So we suggest rewording of the final paragraph on page 5 as submitted in our written comment letter. NCLT provides many of the community programs listed under the page on page 39. We work with residents to purchase their buildings from speculative buyers, assisted thousands of California households to access rental assistance in the last 2 years, and have a mortgage assistance program for first-time home buyers. So please consider relaxing the partnership with an independent nonprofit requirement if the nonprofit developer is also providing community services. And to address the housing crisis, we need to embrace new yet viable financial and legal models. And we know that Round 7 guidelines, homeownership is a priority. And the CLT model makes homes permanently affordable and has been working in the country and the state for over 50 years. The Strategic Growth Council told us there's no TA available for an organization like ours. So we urge you to consider extra points for innovative models and to also provide TA support for innovative yet established nonprofits. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Linda Kwong.
Good afternoon, members of the council. I'm Linda Kwong, Real Property Program Manager for the Santa Clara Valley Open Space Authority. On the SALT Grant Awards, we would like to express our sincere gratitude to staff at the Department of Conservation and the Strategic Growth Council for the hard work they put into the SALT program, including evaluating the grant applications, the great support they provide to applicants to advance the projects, as well as for their ongoing work to continuously improve grant program guidelines. The Open Space Authority often holds up the SALT program as a model for public grant program effectiveness and flexibility. Thank you very much for the award for funding for the agricultural easement in southern Santa Clara County to build on prior state conservation investments there, including SALC investments in support of our county's award-winning agricultural plan and to protect 2 key agricultural properties in the county. The efforts we and our partners are putting towards peri-urban farmland conservation in the region are having real impacts on containing sprawl and providing a range of climate resilience benefits. Thank you very much for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you, Linda. Our next speaker is Michelle Rousey.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
You can. You may begin your comment.
Okay, so I'm Michelle Rousey. I'm a consumer advocate, and I'm a power wheelchair user and a person with a disability. And I come to speak to you today about the inequity of the housing and transit and 2 areas where people with disabilities continue to face widespread accessibility barriers. The program is an opportunity to remove those barriers, and its guidelines fail to do so. SGC needs to consult with the disability community early in the process and incorporate accessibility into program guidelines. Right now, the needs of disability community are ignored in this program. As a person with a disability who uses a power wheelchair, I find many barriers to transit housing for persons with disabilities. Sidewalks are broken or blocked, and not all have curb cuts and I live in Oakland, California. Where's the inequality and equity for this population? It's not there. And I'd also like to see people with disabilities invited to your conferences and to be part of your meeting groups so that we have access to you guys to be able to input on these guidelines. Too many times people with disabilities are not at the table and to give our recommendations to changes going forward. I'd appreciate that you look into having somebody with a disability or disability groups to this process. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Mark Del Piero. Mark, are you with us?
Good afternoon. My name is Mark Del Piero. I'm the Chief Executive Officer for the Ag Land Trust, and we're located in Monterey County, California. Monterey County has an annual production value of its agricultural receipts of $4.1 billion. And we are obviously strongly in support of your staff's recommendation. The Ag Land Trust here in Salinas has been in existence since 1984. We've preserved over 46,000 acres of prime and productive farmlands, and your program and the staff that supports this program are vitally important for us to be able to continue to pursue our conservation efforts into the next 21st century. I'd particularly like to point out to the members of the council, you've got some tremendous staff people working at the Department of Conservation, including Sean Atherton, Melinda Kelly, Michael Shaw and Tim Bryant. They are unsung heroes who work with our nonprofit organizations on a daily and weekly and monthly basis to help us along so as to be able to successfully pursue the goals that have been established by the state of California and by your council to try and preserve farmland and to limit the amount of carbon that goes into our atmosphere from urban sprawl. We want to thank you very much for your consideration. Strongly recommend your support of your staff's recommendation. And again, acknowledge that the purposes of this program are going to benefit multiple generations of Californians by guaranteeing the quality of life that we currently enjoy. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Kyle Walsh.
Good afternoon, Council, and thanks for the opportunity to speak. I'm happy to really say thank you to the Department of Conservation staff, SGC Council, and everybody involved in both operating the Sustainable Ag Lands Conservation Program to date and for your significant support to conservation around the state, not just in our service area of San Luis Obispo County this year. The two projects that were recommended for funding through SALC's review included the Kamada Ranch, which you heard Lauren and Ted discuss, at least in relation to the Waltz Turner Ranches near Merced just a few minutes ago. The Kamada Ranch is over 27,000 acres in our county, and it's one of the largest remaining private land conservation opportunities in all of San Luis Obispo County. This project really checks every possible box between agricultural protections, wildlife habitat and movement, open space, water resource protections, and many of the other priorities that we have as a land trust and that other groups and partners in the region also focus on. Together with the Waltz Turner Ranch, these projects will lead to over 37,000 acres being protected across the state. That would not be possible without the SOC program. In addition to Kamada, the Adelaida Springs Ranch has also been recommended for funding. We're thrilled to see that happen because Adelaida Springs is in a critical area in the northwest portion of our county called the Adelaida. And this property really also exhibits each of those really critical conservation values, both ag and non-ag in that region, and will be a major connection to both existing private protected lands and public lands in the area. Finally, and last but certainly not least, we're extremely happy to see capacity grants move forward through this past year's round. There is not significant funding for this kind of work for land trusts around the state, and I can feel very comfortable that you will see much better projects in the future and much more efficient projects in the future due to that funding. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Ali Medders Knight.
Hello.
We can hear you. You may begin your comments.
Thank you. My name is Ali Medders Knight. I'm the Executive Director of California Open Lands. I am the new Executive Director. I've been in since November of this year. I'm also a local Manchukuo tribal member known as a Master TEK practitioner. That's traditional ecological knowledge. I've been practicing and educating for the last 20 years on tribal restoration projects. And so our project that we have is for an area called Table Mountain. And this is a very historically known area, known to tribes for the flowers and the seed banking that's taken place up there. Today, it's still popularly known because of its super blooms and is a big attraction in the area. We are looking to kind of meet some executive order from Newsom in 1519 with some reconciliation support by collaborating with local tribes and using traditional ecological knowledge as the method of collaborating and creating a comprehensive proposal for co-stewardship using tribal engagement and tribal knowledge of how to actually procure and manage and steward traditional lands of this type. And I appreciate your time listening to me and the opportunity to speak. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Kathleen Hitt.
Hello.
Kathleen?
Hello. Can you hear me?
You can. You may begin your comment.
Super. Kathleen Hitt, the Executive Director with Siskiyou Land Trust. I am going to echo several comments that have been brought forward. A deep gratitude to Strategic Growth Council for bringing this program forward, to Department of Conservation staff who have just been an absolute joy and pleasure to work with in really listening to the needs of California and carrying forward through conservation programs and support these possibilities. Siskiyou Land Trust has 2 projects that were recommended for funding today, one of which is an agricultural conservation easement that really has been years in the making due to all of the different projects and support through Department of Conservation that leveraged capacity and dollars to this point. And I'd say this ranch offers protection of 2 miles of the Shasta River that, according to some of our scientists up here, provide an unprecedented amount of fisheries, Chinook salmon, both commercial, cultural resources for the Klamath Basin. And it also provides a place along the I-5 corridor to establish a buffer for development. While Siskiyou County is known as one of the more remote, I suppose, and less developed, quote unquote, counties, the Interstate 5 travels right through, and the shift in rural development and transportation corridors means a lot of these ag lands and open spaces and habitat corridors are at risk. And so this funding is just absolutely critical for all of those aspects of conservation and to support climate change. And I want to say deep gratitude for offering the capacity grant. Like several folks have shared, the grant will ensure we meet our 30 by 30 targets for California and really support long-term conservation benefits for the state. So much gratitude. Thank you.
Thank you. Our last speaker on this item is Raven Wilder Serber.
Good afternoon. My name is Raven Wilder Serber. I'm a Planner 1 for the Planning Department of the Hoopa Valley Tribe, as well as a tribal member. We just want to say thank you for this amazing opportunity. We are so excited to be the first tribe to be awarded SALC funding through a planning grant. Our team worked really hard on this proposal. I also wanted to say that I really appreciate the process to submit the proposal. It was simple and straightforward, and the pre-proposal process was very helpful as well. And I apologize that we were unable to attend in person to give our thanks today. Thank you.
Thank you. Chair, that concludes. Oh, we had one additional public commenter. Yeah. Find her in the chat. Priscilla Mumpower. Priscilla, are you with us? Not able to find Priscilla. If she gets back in the Zoom, we can return. Otherwise, we'll give it back to you, Chair.
Great. Well, thank you for all of those comments. It helps me, it helps council members to actually hear directly from people who are impacted by our policies and programs. And that always helps improve our work and our focus. And not only just hearing directly from you, but whenever we go and visit some of these projects that are funded through SGC, it is so informative, especially when we sit here and make decisions. So I want to say thank you. But that's not only just for the kudos that we hear, which a lot of the people who spoke today were praising a lot of the programs. More importantly, I think the areas that actually need improvement in discussions around the accessibility issue is an example. It is important for us to hear and continuously improve that. I know specifically to accessible housing issues, the AHSC, the Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities Program, has to meet state and federal ADA or Americans with Disability Act by law. So it is known that they have to meet that, otherwise they wouldn't be funded. Having said that, if there's anything that we can do to continuously improve, it is important for us to hear from you. And I just want to ask staff, obviously, to continue to work with that community or any other where we, as you have done in the past, when groups highlight challenges in our programs or guidelines. That I don't know, Karen, if you have anything else to add to some of the questions that came up. For me specifically, things that are that could continue to be improved in the programs in the future.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Acefa. For the points you just made, my understanding also is that the AHSC team is actively scheduling meetings with the disability rights community to begin those conversations already around how the next round of guidelines can better meet the needs of that community, especially around questions related to paratransit and some of the comments that were brought up today as well.
That reminded, we made a motion and a second, opening it up to council discussion.
Open to council comment. If any, it is the consent calendar, or we can just move to a vote, whatever you prefer.
Oh.
I would just, if I may, Chair, I just want to take a very quick moment, Yana Garcia here, to echo your comments, particularly from the disability rights advocates. Really important feedback for us to hear, and just want to note that it's very well taken, and just want to reiterate the appreciation for it. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Anyone else? Having said that, so we have a motion by Secretary Ross and second by me.
I'll begin the roll call.
Roll call.
Director Acefa?
Yes.
Councilmember Capretz?
Yes.
Councilmember Cardenas?
Yes.
Secretary Castro Ramirez?
Yes.
Secretary Garcia?
Yes.
Secretary Omashakin?
Yes.
Secretary Ross?
Yes.
Deputy Director Radhakrishna?
Yes.
Chancellor Munoz?
Aye.
Assistant Secretary Marina Rivera?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Great. Now we'll move to item 6, which is an action item to adopt the resolution on Council Priority 3. This is the housing, climate, and equity priority. I would like to invite Kieran again to introduce the item, and then Sean Kennedy, SGC's Special Projects Analyst, to make the presentation on this item. Kieran?
Thank you, Chair Acefa. I'd like to introduce today's first action item, which is a council resolution on housing, climate, and equity. This was originally slated for discussion at the October Council, so we're excited to bring it for discussion today. This item is SGC's third council priority, and it represents a valuable opportunity to leverage much of the work already happening within state government and across council agencies to address some of the state's most significant challenges in a holistic, coordinated, and more unified fashion. The resolution has been months in the making, as you well know, and so I'd like to thank our Council Priority 3 champions, Secretary Castro Ramirez, Director Acefa, Secretary Garcia, and Councilmember Capretz, as well as all of your designees for all of your leadership and support over these couple of months. So with that quick introduction, I'll turn it over to Sean Kennedy, SGC's Special Projects Analyst, to provide a little bit more detail on the resolution and next steps.
Great. Thank you, Kieran. Good afternoon, Chair and Council members. I'm Sean Kennedy, Special Projects Analyst at SGC, and also would like to echo the thanks to the Council champions for their support and leadership on this effort so far. Next slide, please. So this is now SGC's third council priority. Council priorities focus on high impact areas that warrant and benefit from a whole of council approach. Priorities leverage the council's position as an interagency body to advance holistic responses to complex and interdisciplinary issues, such as the nexus between housing, climate, and equity. So today, SGC staff is recommending the adoption of a resolution to elevate and coordinate housing, climate, and equity efforts across Strategic Growth Council and member agency initiatives. Next slide, please. So as you're all aware, what, where, and how we build housing and infrastructure has profound implications for the social, environmental, health, and vitality of individuals, communities, regions, and the state. Following decades of decentralized growth, inadequate supply of housing, and a lack of integrated transportation infrastructure, in recent years, the state has enacted a wide range of goals, plans, programs, and other investments that aim to reshape development patterns across California. The state's historic $54 billion climate budget, combined with recent funding at the federal level, offers a tremendous opportunity to build on this momentum. Next slide, please. Despite these increasingly ambitious climate commitments and historic investments in housing, greenhouse gas emissions, particularly in the transportation sector, continue to rise, and housing remains out of reach for a growing number of Californians. Low-income communities and Black, Indigenous, and people of color bear a disproportionate share of the social, economic, and environmental burden, and the gap between those with access to opportunities in healthy environments and those without continues to widen. These challenges represent a disconnect between what is possible under the state's robust policy framework and what is currently being achieved. Many state programs, particularly older programs, are not aligned with each other or with contemporary state objectives. And as the council heard and discussed at the August council meeting at UC Merced, local jurisdictions tasked with implementing the state's climate and housing goals often lack consistent access to and awareness of available support, guidance, targeted funding, and policy tools to implement those actions. As a result, many plans remain as plans rather than fulfilling their potential for meaningful, positive transformation. Next slide, please. Overcoming these challenges and ensuring state efforts meet their potential requires a coordinated, holistic approach. Such an approach requires horizontal coordination across state agencies, as well as vertical coordination across local, regional, and state government entities. This approach is captured in the concept of strategic growth, the core mandate of this council, defined as an inclusive, coordinated interagency approach to development and conservation that helps protect our health and natural environment and make our communities more resilient, culturally and economically vibrant, and socially diverse. Next slide, please. So currently, SGC staff is working in collaboration with council champions, council entities, and a number of existing interagency working groups to operationalize the concept of strategic growth. A work plan based on this effort, comprised of short, medium, and long-term goals and actions, will be brought to council for review in early 2023. Next slide, please. The action plan aims to leverage the council's position as a public-facing interagency body and to accelerate progress towards the state's goals through a combination of public engagement, technical assistance, and interagency coordination. Based on input from your designees, specific focus areas include evaluating and prioritizing actions to implement existing recommendations, identifying additional tools and strategies to meet the state's housing, climate, and equity goals, removing barriers through technical assistance, data, partnerships, and elevating best practices, and improving coordination and information sharing on new and existing efforts. Next slide, please. The action plan is informed by many of the desired outcomes each of you have identified in the development of the resolution. Key outcomes include a better understanding of the strengths and limitations of our existing tools, identification of achievable actions to leverage opportunities and remove barriers to strategic growth, and ultimately, effective land use planning that enables expedited housing development in coordination with conservation of environmentally sensitive lands for the benefit of all Californians. Next slide, please. To conclude, SGC staff recommends the adoption of a resolution to elevate and coordinate housing, climate, and equity across Strategic Growth Council and member agency initiatives. Thank you. I'll now pass it back to Matt to initiate comment.
Thank you. If members of the public that are present would like to comment on this item, please submit a public comment card at the front table. To make virtual public comment, please visit sgc.ca.gov/meetings and complete the public comment form there. I'll now pass it back to the chair.
Great. Thanks, Sean, for that presentation. So we'll initiate council comments. I'm going to start with my fellow council champions first. So I'll start with Secretary Castros Ramirez, then Secretary Garcia, and then Nicole Carpretz, and then I'll conclude and then follow the rest. Thanks, Secretary Castros.
Fantastic. Well, I am so excited. I'm so excited for this item. I know it was on the agenda last meeting, but we had an outpouring of public commenters, which is really exciting. I think we had about 100 people show up and really reminded us about the impact that we're having in communities, and more importantly, how we need to continue to double down in terms of reaching out and continuing to build that partnership with communities that are doing good work on the ground. Months in the making, as mentioned by the staff, but this resolution and this priority really reflects a lot of excellent work from various departments and agencies. Being a council champion for this priority, along with Secretary Garcia, Public Member Capretz, and of course working closely with Chairman Sam Masefa, is an honor for me and for our agency. Looking more closely at housing, climate, and equity gives the council an opportunity to think about what strategic growth really means, where it's already happening, and how we can do more. I'm excited to share with you just one of the reasons why I was running late. Just today, the state through HCD announced the 6 cities that have been awarded a designation called Pro Housing Designation. These 6 cities joined the city of Sacramento, and I'll name the cities because I think it's important for you all to celebrate them and to know. It's the city of Oakland, Citrus Heights, Roseville, West Sacramento, Fontana, and San Diego. These are leaders, and these are cities that are taking a leadership role in terms of committing to building more housing, but committing to building more housing in communities and in places where housing is more closely located to transit, where it's more closely located to jobs, to healthcare, and to the key amenities that we know families need to be able to not only be stable, but to be able to thrive. And it was really a delight to talk to the mayors earlier today to celebrate the good work that they're doing. And Mayor Todd Gloria from San Diego said this, so I'm going to borrow his quote. He said, "Putting good housing where people want to be is not just good housing policy, it's good climate policy." And that's exactly what we're doing today by lifting up this priority. This council priority shares the same approach. Let's continue aligning our efforts and acting together to address housing, climate, transportation, and equity throughout the work that we're doing. And we need to do this because the problems that we face, the complexity of the issues that we're facing and that communities are facing, quite frankly, and unfortunately, that communities of color, low income, economically vulnerable communities facing these challenges more so. These complex challenges require for us to be more intentional in terms of how we collaborate and how we bring our systems together. And as the governor says, to move with speed and with a sense of urgency. With housing availability and affordability presenting an incredible challenge for our state and the nation, we're tackling these issues head on with planning with communities, interagency coordination, advancing policies, and creating innovative new programs. Our state priorities include the goal of planning for an additional 2.5 million new homes in the next 8 years, of which 1 million must be affordable to lower income households. The largest gap in housing supply is for those that serve very low, extremely low income households. And that basically, in the affordable housing speak, is the measure that we use is 50% of area median income or below. But this isn't just about production or affordability, as we were reminded at UC Merced, and Chancellor Munoz, thank you so much for your hospitality when we were out at your campus. We were reminded right in that conversation that the work that we're doing is about ensuring that we're building equitable communities, that we're centering equity in the work that we do. Our goals must include creating communities that are better integrated, where we're addressing residential segregation, and we're recognizing that some communities have suffered more than others from this investment. When I think about housing, climate, and equity, this requires attention to the individual, to the family, to that household. It requires attention to building that housing complex. So attention to the type of building, the quality of those units. It requires respect in how we work with the community and bring community members in, and an understanding of the regional dynamics. And so this is the level of intentionality that we're bringing to this work, not just through our agency at BCSH, but the work that we are doing collectively with my colleagues. When this council thinks about housing, we also think about health access to transportation, conserving natural and working lands, energy efficiency, and more. I want to thank the executive director who couldn't be with us today, Lynn Van Cog-Lieber, and her entire staff for integrating all of these themes in the resolution, and for accepting our edits and more edits and more edits. We wanted to get it right. And so I have more, that I had to share, but I think that more important, I will end there. Really, the important step that we're taking today is formalizing work that is already occurring. And we ask all of you that are in the audience, that are with us through video, to continue joining our movement here at the state to bring housing and climate and the issues of equity and livability to make them real. We're your partners, and we're prepared to take this to the next level. Thank you.
Garcia.
Very, very well said, Secretary. And thank you for all of your leadership and work in this space. You as well, Public Member Kafretz. Really a pleasure to share this effort with two such leaders. I'm excited to be here today and very glad to see the issues of housing, climate, and equity linked in such a deliberate way in this resolution, coming from right next door where the Air Resources Board is voting to approve. I imagine they're voting to approve after a rich discussion of the scoping plan, precedent-setting plan here that we are using as a roadmap, of course, to achieve our carbon neutrality and emission reduction goals. And chief among the issues that we will be dealing with is really centering ourselves around equity and environmental justice. Affordability, as we all know, is something that we are grappling with in a crisis on par with the climate crisis, and really happy to see us taking on affordability and equity in the way that we are through this resolution and through our intergovernmental approach here. As the resolution indicates, and as Secretary Castro Ramirez just mentioned, where and how we build all of this new housing, of course, matters for climate outcomes and for the well-being of Californians, especially those disproportionately impacted by climate and environmental health hazards. In particular, our strategic growth in developing housing is key to implementing the sustainable community strategies, which we want to uplift here under SB 375, the program administered by CARB. Climate housing equity connections are also key in our interagency building and decarbonization work. Although that is not a focus of this particular resolution, I want to make sure that we coordinate across these building decarbonization efforts and are also well coordinated with our land use decision-making partners at the local level. And as we move forward, I'd like to just suggest a few principles, if I may, to guide the development of this resolution and action plan. And the first is to really think big. I want to stress that housing equity and climate issues are not going to be solved by making minor adjustments. This much we know. We need major changes to the status quo. And as the resolution suggests, it's essential to align our existing policies and programs across all state agencies. In addition, this resolution presents an opportunity to think bigger about how to explore what it will actually take to reach our housing production goals, which sound extraordinarily monumental, and our climate change targets, which we also know will be challenging to meet. The second is to use data, really use data to guide our actions wherever possible. Our actions have to be evidence-based to achieve the policy actions we're striving for. And the third, finally, which I think we are making much progress towards, is of course to center equity. We need to ensure that each action that we take has a clear nexus to advancing equitable outcomes, including fair housing, environmental justice, access to transit, and empowering communities and residents. Our action plan should identify who or what will be better off as we implement each action identified. And I do just want to give again a nod to so many of the disability advocates who spoke to us earlier, and want to suggest that we also consider their comments and their needs as we move forward in this priority area. And thank you so much for this work. It's very exciting.
Nicole?
Thank you. Also excited to be in partnership with my fellow council members, and I'm excited to work on this issue. I'm also pleased to hear the city of San Diego got a pro-housing designation, because the city has passed some pretty progressive and bold policies and is committed, as far as we can tell, to build as much infill, affordable, equitable housing as possible. I just want to kind of lean in so we can facilitate this conversation with everybody else about some ideas that to augment what staff and I guess other agencies had recommended for kind of outcomes for this policy, which is what I'm most interested in as an advocate on the ground. We continue to see a pretty large, as you know, to use the jargon, NIMBY movement, and they remain effective in preventing even the city of San Diego from maximizing housing opportunities. And this happens in every community plan update that we have. We leave a lot of housing on the table. And so as advocates, it's disappointing. As climate justice advocates, it's disappointing. So I know we're definitely taking positive steps in Southern California, but at the same time, we are still capitulating to some of the community members who are really just fighting to preserve the status quo, and it's not acceptable. So in the spirit of trying to identify ways the state can help without actually just mandating that we can only build infill in the right places, I think it would be helpful, and again, just coming from a grassroots perspective, for the state to have a database of progressive policy options for cities and counties and local governments to adopt, just in one kind of centralized location, because I know there's a lot of advocates, who do want more housing, and obviously local officials who just may not know what policies to bring forward. Obviously, the city of San Diego, 8th largest city in the country, has the resources and capacity to develop their own policies. But when you get to some of the smaller cities, that doesn't exist. So I think it would be nice if one of the outcomes could be creating a database of policies, especially kind of the best practices and examples throughout the state of policies that have been passed to facilitate more affordable housing, and the success of those policies. I think some training for local officials, like again, not just policies, but messaging and how to help communicate the benefits of infill housing to the broader community. Because when we attend grassroots, I'm talking community planning group meetings with just neighborhood level residents who are very active and frankly opposed to new housing, we see that city staff, even the city of San Diego, as such a large city, still continues with how to present the messaging around housing and how to respond to some of the messaging that they hear from the community. So I'm really a believer that there's, that the city staff want to do the right thing and they're trying to do the right thing, but they're not equipped to do the right thing. And so I would hope that the state could help them with that. And then, lastly, I think there also just could be kind of a statewide mechanism and I don't know how it would manifest, but around the same issue around housing, that I still think we're not hearing it the same way we are definitely hearing all about water conservation. Like that is a message in the public arena. It's very effective. Obviously, when the governor, send out text messages and asking us to save water, asking us to save energy, that works. But just meaning that you all have a massive platform and that a lot of community members and residents do want to do the right thing, and they do want to help facilitate success in their community and be climate advocates. And sometimes they just kind of need from the right messengers, trusted messengers and others, how they can get there. So anyhow, I just want to, and I don't have the exact platform for that. It's not as easy as a text message, obviously, to talk about housing, but I do think the state does have kind of these different mechanisms to communicate why marrying housing, climate, and equity is such a positive will be such a positive impact, will have such a positive impact on the community. So those are my comments, because I just want to help ensure everybody else on the dais can weigh in. But I thank SGC for taking leadership role on this, and I'm excited to help engage in the process as you move forward. So thank you so much.
Great. Thank you, fellow champions. I couldn't agree with you more in a lot of the comments. Sort of high level, I remember a year ago when the governor challenged us to think in housing as a climate strategy. That was just a packed kind of directive from him. What he meant by that is these are all issues that are really interconnected, as it was articulated by my fellow champions in that. And then I come from a land use bias, and I believe that the decisions we make on how we use our land, not only just for housing, but for anything else, has probably the most impact on climate, equity, on economy, the well-being of the planet, and all of the above. And for me, that doesn't come better than integrating and looking at what we mean by housing as a climate strategy to address all of these issues. So this is not just a numbers game in terms of production of housing, which is very critically important because we have significant shortage. And I couldn't agree more. We have to be bold as well. And I think California has been bold, but now we have to show results and put projects on the ground. And Secretary Ramirez, I applaud your efforts, especially in sort of the championing housing in general, specifically affordable housing. So I think when we mean about equity and when we look at this, we have to be, it has to be meaningful, and we have to make sure that the integrated aspects of housing, climate, and equity are well orchestrated by all of us. And it takes not only all of government, but I think all participants, builders, and local communities and nonprofit organizations to be part of that. So I'm very, very excited that this is beginning to take shape. I just want to point a couple of things within the Office of Planning and Research as the state's land use agency responsible for land use and sort of overall across state climate and economic development policies. We are excited to really look at what are the tools that we have within OPR and its statute to actually support this effort. There are a couple that I want to point out. The general plan guidelines. General plans are the roadmaps for local jurisdictions to implement land use. The state has had very bold policies and programs and legislation over the last 3-4 years that really touch on encouraging local jurisdictions to produce more housing, to produce more affordable housing. At the end of the day, those are the local jurisdictions who implement those projects. And as we know, California is incredibly diverse. Not every local jurisdiction has a sound general plan or specific plan that guides them in their development of projects or implementation of housing projects. So my office is excited to really look at the general plan that needs to be updated and consistent with some of the statutes and the requirements that we're putting forward, and consistent to what we want to get out of local jurisdictions through this effort, housing as a climate policy. So within the general plan, so we have to look at if the guidelines are consistent with the statutes that came up in the last couple of years. Unless those are consistent, it's very hard for local jurisdictions to follow through. Or in some cases, not the housing champions, but the areas that are actually resistant to more housing, I use the general plan in some cases to actually oppose any housing development, especially affordable housing. So it is important that we update the guidelines so that equity is embedded in there, climate goals are embedded in there and are up to date. So we're looking forward to see that. The second part is the CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act, which is, some see it as a challenge, but for the most part, its impact has been to make sure that developments actually respond to climate equity, climate greenhouse gas reduction, and more. So we want to look at that as well, which, OPR sort of develops the policies to see if there are opportunities to actually streamline CEQA so that housing developments that meet some of these criteria are more expedited, right? But by the same token, to also make sure that the guardrails that CEQA puts forward in indoor air quality or the location of housing where the impact, especially for affordable housing and vulnerable communities, are significant when you're locating housing next to industrial areas with horrible air quality. So we want to look at that to see if we could tweak and support this effort to make sure that our regulations actually then support the outcome that we're looking for. I'll just give you an example. Centennial specific plan in North LA County, of 8.4 million square foot sprawl development. But for CEQA's sort of legal challenge, the significant amount of improvements that they have made, including elimination of harmful natural gas from commercial properties within that development. 8.4 million square foot is a lot of development. There will be significant number of housing. But for CEQA, they would not have done that. But for CEQA, they would not have installed 30,000 electric vehicle charging stations as part of that development. And I could go on, but it is important that we connect the dots through, when we say all of government, in all aspects of the outcome that we're looking for. So we look at our own programs. And CEQA helps, make sure transportation infrastructure that supports that housing is sustainable and sensible. So Secretary Omashakin will make sure that we use CEQA to make sure that his camp is, which is one of the most sustainable transportation agencies anywhere in the country, that we need to push the limits in all aspects. So I'm really incredibly excited by this resolution that came from this council, and moving forward to work with my colleagues to advance this very specific policy objective. So I'll stop at that and open it up to comments from other members.
No, I want transportation to go first, of course. So I really appreciate and concur with all the comments that have been made. I always bring my own perspective and experiences to this. And what I love about this is the linkage. Linking equity, climate, housing is a forcing mechanism that we all need to be as intentional and as successful as we all know that we can be. And one of the things I like about this is that it forces us to think about where we're developing and where we don't. I'm very mindful that we're taking on all of the policies that we are to expand affordable housing at a time where we're also reckoning with water limitations and natural resource limitations. And that may lead to pretty extensive land fallowing in an area of the state where, when you want to talk about affordability, that's probably where it's going to happen. So having this now is especially critical, that we think about where should we develop and where should we not develop it. It's also happening at a time where, thanks to the leadership of our first partner, we've made quite an investment in local resilient food production and access for people. And that means farm to school and making sure our children have access to that. It means farming in the traditional areas that we farm, but it also means farming in urban areas, whether they're community gardens or small scale farmers. And we know that the task force that we are standing up on land access, which is the biggest challenge for many small, historically underserved farmers, is land tenure and land access. And how can we use that in a way that helps keep us building up instead of out, and thinking about all the places that could easily be turned into development, because many land use agencies, as we know, are under-resourced and don't have the capacity. Without your strong leadership at OPR, the tools that you have made available, I think Nicole made some really good points about other ways we can support those land use planners to really put this all together. It's a lot to put on people, and yet just think what this state would look like if we'd been doing this for decades. So let's not continue borrowing from the future. Let's really reinvest in thinking differently, linking up, and really putting people at the center, whether it's for housing, equity, or for me, access to really healthy, locally grown food. So I really appreciate the conversation today and your good work. Thank you.
Secretary Homashek.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and to the my fellow secretaries who've already spoken, and you as well. I think extremely well noted and well said. Look, these issues are clearly all connected. I think over the years, we've somehow gotten to the point, to Secretary Ross' points just now, we've recently sort of come back to a place where we're recognizing more and more that we have to do this work jointly. President Kennedy made a statement to Congress in 1963 about this very issue. He said, transportation and land use go hand in hand, should go hand in hand, as two inseparable aspects of the same process. 1963. Here we are today, still battling and trying to make sure that as public entities and nonprofits and NGOs, that we somehow make sure that these efforts are inseparable, that they're a part of the same process. So I appreciate the intentionality here that the staff is having to lean us further into this, and the fellow council members as well, to make sure that there's intentionality in making sure that we're not moving away from the fact that these components, these sectors, if you will, go hand in hand as two inseparable aspects of the same process. So good work.
Great, thanks. And I mean, great invoking Kennedy on transportation and housing. I never heard that quote before. And yeah, I do believe those especially go significantly hand in hand. Actually, I'm even more biased. I believe good land use policy is good transportation policy.
Absolutely.
Better. So I look forward to working with you in those areas. Any other council members? Ron, please.
Thank you. From the Health and Human Services Agency, I want to build off the comments of our champions and all our members who have spoken thus far. First, I want to thank the SGC for really explicitly naming and elevating health into the resolution. This really exemplifies the commitment to the climate, health, and equity, CHE, other CHEs from the resolution title, that the mission of SGC really elevates. At the federal level, Health and Human Services for the Equitable Recovery just launched a new framework called the 7 Vital Conditions. And housing is really one of those vital conditions. It's a basic human need. It's also health. And so we really look forward to supporting this resolution. Dr. Margot Kuchel says housing is the most powerful medicine, and it's more powerful when it meets certain outcomes. And I'd like to build off Public Member Capretz's challenge to really dive into those outcomes that we want to see in the implementation of this. And so I want to name a few of them. We would like to see the plans and policies and allocations of the resources meet 5 criteria, and to track those over time. That it looks at how much of the housing is permanent, how much is supportive, how much is zero carbon, how much is climate resilient, and how much is healthy, getting back to natural gas and other things that benefit all members of the family. So if we look at these in more detail, we can track the impact over time in the multi-benefits, and really those who are unhoused, at risk of becoming unhoused, overcrowded in substandard housing, they deserve a safe, healthy place to call home. And it's in that spirit that we look forward to supporting it. So that's the first outcome we'd like to focus on in implementation. The second is to really look at the home itself as a place for health and supporting a maximum indoor temperature threshold, which we've talked about before. We have a minimum indoor temperature for heating, but we don't have a maximum one for cooling. And coming out of a 10-day heat wave over Labor Day weekend, noting that our residents can't withstand the hotter future, which has already begun, we hope that we can build that into building codes as well as looking at building decarbonization. Third is really building off Secretary Ross's comment on answering that tough question of where we should and where we shouldn't be developing. And that may mean invoking things like CEQA to really put up those guardrails on unchecked development into areas that we know have higher risk of sea level rise, wildfire risk, flooding. At the same time, we could embed weatherization as one of those health promoting measures that can be climate friendly, zero carbon, cooling based weatherization. And it really goes hand in hand with our decarb efforts. Finally, we just want to invoke the moral value notion of not just health for all, but also housing for all, and that framing of housing and health for all. And that's really building on Secretary Castro Ramirez's leadership as a co-chair of the ICH, the Interagency Council on Homelessness. And on behalf of Secretary Galley, he offers that council as a place to really connect the dots and fill in the gaps. And we're glad that it was added to this resolution as another working group to move towards the outcomes and implementation. So thanks.
Thank you, Rohan. Really, really great point. Anyone else from council? Secretary Cardenas, council member.
Mr. Chair, thanks for the opportunity to recognize and celebrate fellow commissioners or council members, Castro, Ramirez, and Garcia, Nicole Capretz, and yourself, Mr. Chair, for your leadership in lifting this council priority up. This particular item, I hope, I believe, years from now will be remembered by some of us as being a real pivotal moment in this state's real commitment toward climate action. This is something that could easily fly under the radar until one takes a real close look at the actual resolution, which I might remind us all was largely drafted by council members themselves. There's one particular aspect near the end. It's one of the resolved clauses where it states that the council and every member agency commit to using a minimum of one public council meeting annually as a forum to share measurable actions and best practices implemented, highlight success stories, discuss remaining barriers, and actively engage with stakeholders to gather input with a specific focus on California Native American tribes and under-resourced communities. Let's reflect on what I think we're seeing here. What we're seeing is some of the most powerful people in the fourth largest economy in the world who are saying that they are willing to hold themselves and each other accountable for meaningful, reportable, and measurable climate action objectives. And to discuss this no less than annually in an open forum to which we all are invited. That is an amazing transformation, and I think it's a testament to the leadership of their boss in common, our governor, who has made it clear that in his mind, increasingly, housing policy is climate policy. And I really want to point out something that Secretary Castro Ramirez said. I am in ever increasing awe of her diligence and her courage and her vision, but even more so today, because it's important to listen to leaders when they speak, especially on something as momentous as I believe she believes this policy priority to be. She described what is happening in this state, what she feels she is a part of, and what I think she is trying to drive in her massive agency as a movement. This is frontline movement, movimiento nomenclature that indigenous people and communities of color have been using up and down this state for years, trying to get governments to finally act on behalf of communities. And what Secretary Lourdes is saying is that she is elevating the consciousness of the people who have the privilege of serving us under her leadership to that of being a movement. It's a remarkable day, it seems to me, and I hope to have the privilege of holding my fellow council members accountable for the actions of their various member agencies. Easy for me to say as an appointee of the speaker, I got no agencies to worry about, so I get to worry about all of yours. So congratulations and thank you guys really for accepting this challenge and for designing it and advocating to have this for yourself. It's really a spectacular moment in the governance, I think, of this state.
Thank you for those comments, Councilmember Cardenas. Really appreciate that. Anyone else would like to follow that? Having seen none, so we'll go to public comments.
Thank you, Chair. I'll begin the public comment with in-person public comment. And we have approximately 3 in-person public comments for this, which is item 6 on the agenda. We'll begin, and I'll read off the names of all 3 public commenters on this item, and I'd ask that you come up and kind of line up so we can move through fairly quickly. We'll begin with Tien Tran, then we'll go to Olivia Seidemann and Vamsi Kumar Kolta. Tien, whenever you're ready.
Hello, Council. My name is Tien Tran, and I'm a policy advocate from Community Water Center. At Community Water Center, we affirm that clean water is a human right, not a privilege. We work with domestic well owners who rely on groundwater for their drinking water in the Central Valley and on the Central Coast. We want to thank the Strategic Growth Council for elevating and coordinating housing, climate, and equity. Thank you, Secretary Ross, for highlighting the connection between water resources and housing. In this effort, we want to emphasize the importance of protecting groundwater to provide drinking water for communities, especially given the climate crisis and housing crisis. A house is not habitable without running, clean, safe, and affordable water. This year alone, 1,454 dry wells were reported across the state. The majority of the well outages were in the San Joaquin Valley, where there is a definite need for more affordable housing. Protecting the state's investments in housing must be done hand in hand with sustainable groundwater management. It is in the interest of the state that there's robust and protective groundwater management to make sure that drinking water is protected for our communities. Building climate resilience is integral to the success of the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, SGMA. Local groundwater sustainability agencies must account for how climate change impacts groundwater supply and quality, and there are still significant gaps in implementation. In the public forum, I'll provide more information on the plans in the San Joaquin Valley, but felt it was important to remind the Council that the success of SGMA is critical to preserve housing investments in California. The state must protect and prioritize water for human health and safety. We look forward to working with the Strategic Growth Council to ensure that strategic growth in the San Joaquin Valley and Central Coast includes protective groundwater management. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Olivia Seidemann.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Olivia Seidemann. I'm the Climate Policy Coordinator with Leadership Council for Justice and Accountability. And first, we echo the comments of the previous commenter on the human right to water. And we commend SGC's efforts to address the inherent interconnection between housing, climate, and equity, and to prioritize improved coordination across state agencies and initiatives. We look forward to working with you and your staff to develop a strong action plan. We appreciate SGC's efforts to establish interagency coordination on these issues and to engage with the public to ensure that community priorities are incorporated into action plans. We are happy to hear that this will happen and look forward to participating. It is key that there are solid interagency partnerships and partnerships with the public, including public workshops and opportunity for public comment at every stage to ensure that programs are coordinated to avoid unintended consequences. We'd also like to elevate two critical efforts that necessitate urgent action, and we welcome your support to move as quickly as possible. As extreme heat events increase in frequency and intensity, it is imperative that households are able to adapt and are equipped to deal with such extreme heat events. A mandatory maximum indoor air temperature standard is imperative, and we appreciate the funding and direction provided to HCD to develop recommendations in the state budget and budget trailer bill. We urge SGC to work with HCD and other agencies to develop recommendations as quickly as possible for legislative action, not waiting until the 2025 deadline, as this is a problem now. We are ready to work with state agencies to move expeditiously, and we thank Deputy Director Dr. Radhakrishna for his comments on the importance of a mandatory maximum temperature. Relatedly, the state budget allocated nearly $1 billion for equitable building decarbonization in existing homes. We urge SGC to engage in program design and implementation to align efforts across funding programs and ensure vulnerable households can access resources for weatherization, insulation, electrification, and health and safety holistic home upgrades while protecting tenants from displacement and ensuring energy affordability. CEQA has been a strong tool for EJ communities to ensure that.
May we have your final thoughts?
Thank you.
Thank you. Our final in-person speaker is Vamsi Kumar Kolta.
Hi, my name is Vamsi Kumar. I'm the founder and CEO of Remo Homes. I would like to say something about sustainability housing, how interrelated they are. Did you know that construction wastage has been third largest contributor to landfills across the world? This is what it looks like a typical construction site. Every 2 weeks, these things get filled up and dumped elsewhere, and affects air quality, affects the groundwater, a lot of issues. The reason for the residential construction is very simple. We're using very old materials. 1860, this is when traditional stick-built construction was invented. Maybe it became dimensional lumber, but not much change. Drywall, invented in 1891. Fiberglass wool, 1894. We can't solve housing by using same old techniques and same old materials. So, and because of this, the productivity growth in construction is all-time low, just 1% for the last 2 decades, seriously underperforming manufacturing, which is at 3.6%. And also, yes, sorry. It also affects quality of life. Workers have one of the highest, construction workers have one of the highest suicide rates of any industry in the world. No regular work, no regular place of work, no regular times, no on-site support for mental health. This is crazy. Factory-built housing can solve this. However, it means before I go on, it can decrease construction wastage by 90%, make housing affordable, and also increase diversity in housing. However, the total capacity, according to UC Berkeley, is just 4,000 in the state of California. And we need, according to Secretary Casero Sanchez, 2.5 million homes by 2030 to ease the homelessness crisis. It's very hard, at least with factory-built housing. So we need capacity building, which means we need to invest not just in capacity building, but also new materials and new techniques, and support startups like us. We're trying to borrow techniques from automotive industry, semiconductors, and aerospace.
Thank you for your time. May we have your final thoughts?
Yes, I think factory-built housing has the key to make housing of home ownership equitable, make it sustainable, and increase diversity.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving to virtual comment, we have one virtual comment from Lena Ayen.
Thank you. Good afternoon, members of the council. Lena Ayen with the Santa Clara Valley Open Space Authority. The Open Space Authority is excited to support this resolution, which is similar to a resolution passed by the authority's own board of directors in 2021, as stronger cross-sector collaboration and integration of goals will enable more efficient and effective implementation of critical state goals. As stated in the staff report, strategic growth requires consistent and coordinated action on land use and transportation strategies at all levels of government. As staff develop an action plan to operationalize the goals of the priority, we support the stated interest in drawing on the experience and expertise of existing interagency groups, and we also encourage engagement with agencies and organizations with experience implementing the current processes at the local and regional level. This action from the state level will help catalyze actions at the local and regional levels as well. The authority's board of directors passed similar resolution in 2021, as previously mentioned, and we're eager to continue supporting and being a partner in this work. Thank you.
We had one additional comment from Luis Morante. Luis, are you with us?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chair Acefa and council members. My name is Luis Morante. I'm speaking on behalf of the Bay Area Council. I am Vice President of Public Policy with them, where I focus on housing policy. The folks at Spur, a think tank in the Bay Area, also want to align themselves with my comments, and I'm speaking on their behalf today. I really want to thank the administration for undergoing this intensive process and be a partner to you in getting it done right. By any metric, California is doing worse today than it was 5 years ago. Our 3.5 million home shortage still exists and is still creating the homelessness and rent burden that we're all trying to fight here today. In fact, most reports, including ARB's, find that the environmental impacts of housing are getting worse, not better. And while much progress has been made of late in the legislature on legislation that I myself have worked on, we have yet to turn the corner on housing production in a way that will have a meaningful reduction in homelessness in California. Homelessness is fundamentally a market rate housing phenomenon in California. Places like Texas have 1/5 of the homelessness per person that California does. And that's because those places have lower housing fees, better housing approval processes, and more generous zoning for housing. I encourage the administration to take those 3 points on head on and focus on the fact that it is not just a lack of alignment across executive branch authority on these goals that is causing housing production to suffer here. It is willful local government intransigence against the production of housing that is halting housing progress and is the chief source of NIMBYism statewide. Your staff has my contact information, and we would love to help craft these regulations, craft these rules. We'd love to connect with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Louis. That concludes public comment on this item.
Great, thanks, Matt. And thank you all again for the public comments. We take those seriously, and we look forward to working with you as we develop this policy and program. With that, we should get this thing adopted and get to work soon. So is there a motion and a second to adopt the resolution on Council Priority 3?
A motion.
Moises,
I will second that.
Garcia, roll call.
Aye.
Thank you. Director Acefa?
Aye.
Councilmember Cardenas?
Yes.
Secretary Castro Ramirez?
Aye.
Secretary Garcia?
Oh, aye.
Secretary Mashakin?
Yes.
Deputy Director Radhakrishnan?
Yes.
Secretary Ross?
Yes.
Chancellor Munoz?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Great. Now, next item. So before taking that item number 7, there are a couple of housekeeping items we need to make space for. So I'll pass it to Matt on behalf of Councilmember Capretz, then to Chancellor Munoz.
Yes. Thank you. As the founder and chief executive officer of the Climate Action Campaign, working to stop the climate crisis through effective policy action, Councilmember Capretz is in a position of management for an applicant to this round of awards for RCC and has recused herself from consideration and discussion of the item. Thank you.
Great.
As to Chancellor, I'm in a position of management for the University of California, Merced. As an academic institution, the university is part of a proposal applying for funding to be awarded in this item. And as a result, I am recusing myself also from consideration of these awards.
Great. So we will move to take up item 7, which is an action item to approve The staff recommendations for the Regional Climate Collaboratives Round 1 Awards. Kieran and Ina Lupin, SGC's Community Assistance for Climate Equity Program Manager, will present, and then we will have discussions.
Thank you, Chair Acefa. Just some quick background on this program. We've already heard today the call for action around capacity building, so it's an exciting opportunity to bring these awards forward to Council. As you know, this program really goes much further upstream than really any other program that we've seen in the state to harness and build capacity to help communities really self-determine the right solutions, approaches, and partnerships that will help communities go after state, federal funding in a more sustainable and consistent basis. This program is also coming at a really timely moment, given historic levels of funding being made available at the state and federal levels. If the oversubscription to the program that Ina will cover tells us anything, it's that communities up and down the state are seeking more resources to build capacity and increase readiness. And because we're talking about Council priorities, I also wanted to just note how closely aligned the Regional Climate Collaborative Program is with the Council's priority number 2 on capacity building and removing barriers to accessing resources. The team felt it was really important with this program, given the work with lower resource communities across the state, to remove some of those unnecessary or often burdensome barriers. Examples include offering advance payment, not requiring a waiver of tribal sovereign immunity, and then offering both application assistance and implementation technical assistance to applicants. And so with that, I will now hand it over to Ina Lupin, the Program Manager for the Community Assistance for Climate Equity team, to talk a little bit more about staff's recommended Round 1 awards.
Great, thank you, Kieran. Good afternoon, Chair Acefa and Council members. Today, I'll be presenting staff's recommended awards for the inaugural round of the Regional Climate Collaboratives Program. Next slide, please. The RCC program was established by Senate Bill 1072 and aims to help under-resourced communities build capacity to access funding for climate action. RCC is designed to strengthen local coordination, leadership, knowledge, skills, and expertise with a focus on increasing access to funding for project planning and implementation. We released a notice of funding availability for $8.35 million in round 1, with awards ranging from $500,000 to $1.75 million. Next slide, please. All the activities that RCCs carry out should achieve these 4 core program objectives that you see on this slide here, which include developing actionable plans and projects, building social infrastructure, centering community engagement and decision-making, and driving equity-centered processes. RCC applicants define their own regional boundaries within 1 to 8 contiguous counties and focus their place-based work on specific census tracts within the region. At least 51% of the regional communities of focus must meet the definition of under-resourced as defined by SB 1072. Next slide, please. As Kieran mentioned, we were significantly oversubscribed for this program, and the enormous interest in RCC really shows the need for this kind of capacity building across every region of the state. We received 86 pre-proposals from across 56 counties and 45 full applications. The dollar amount requested was $66.6 million, which was 8 times the amount in our NOFA. And the average dollar amount requested was $1.55 million, with most applicants requesting awards towards the top of our funding range. Applications focused on building capacity around a large range of community priorities that have a climate nexus. This is a list of some of the common themes here, but it's certainly not exhaustive. Next slide, please. So a total of 300 applicants, partners applied to the program across the 45 applications that we received. And as Karen mentioned earlier, one of our key goals of the program was to reduce application barriers. So we're really excited to see how many tribal and nonprofit entities applied. We had 179 nonprofits apply across the 45 applications. 4 applications were tribal-led, and a total of 13 included tribes or tribal-serving entities as partners. Next slide, please. So as you'll see here, we had strong representation from across the state, receiving full applications from across 42 different counties. Next slide. We organized a robust two-tiered review process that included 33 reviewers from across 11 state entities. After scoring applications, the 12 top scoring applicants were invited to finalist interviews. We then updated scoring using the rubric and the guidelines to take into account the information that was shared during the interviews. Next slide. These were our top 12 finalists here, which, as you'll see, were really well distributed across the state. The color scale here indicates the areas of the state that were covered by one or more applications. Next slide, please. After the finalist interviews, these are the top scoring applicants that staff are recommending for award today. I'll share a little bit more about each one of these projects in the following slides. Next slide, please. So the first is the Gateway Cities Regional Climate Collaborative, which brings together government and community partners with a strong history of working together in Southeast Los Angeles County. The partners plan to focus on meaningfully engaging community in identifying regional climate needs, as well as developing and implementing multiple climate action plans. The collaborative would also establish a bench of grant writers to train and assist the cities in accessing climate funding. Next slide, please. The Siskiyou Climate Collaborative plans to convene a group of diverse partners to build capacity in the region to tackle extreme wildfires, drought, and other climate risks. Siskiyou County is particularly prone to high-intensity wildfires, having experienced 4 major fires this year alone. The collaborative would develop a countywide climate resiliency plan and launch a technical assistance network to pursue climate projects. Next slide, please. The Southern California Tribal Regional Climate Collaborative is comprised entirely of tribes and tribal serving organizations. It would serve the member tribes of the Southern California Tribal Chairmen's Association through an array of technical assistance and capacity building services. The collaborative aims to build the capacity of tribes in the region to identify and address climate needs, priorities, and opportunities. The partners will offer trainings, grant writing, and technical assistance support to help advance tribal climate priorities in ways that address important community needs, including tribe sovereignty, culture, health, and economy. Next slide, please. The San Joaquin Regional Climate Collaborative builds on existing momentum from the Stockton Rising Transformative Climate Communities grant efforts to expand capacity building across the region. This collaborative would focus its place-based efforts in 3 distinct neighborhoods in Stockton, Lodi, and Tracy, and align with regional efforts to position these communities of focus to access climate investment. Next slide, please. The 2030 Resilient Networks Collaborative is a tribal-led collaborative that would begin by carrying out a gap analysis to assess specific capacity needs for tribes across the region. The collaborative also aims to strengthen relationships amongst tribes in the region and provide technical assistance to address key climate challenges such as extreme heat, drought, flooding, and wildfire. Next slide, please. And last but not least, the Marin Climate Justice Collaborative seeks to reverse historic underinvestment in San Rafael's Canal District and an unincorporated Marin City. These 2 communities are among the most vulnerable to sea level rise in the Bay Area. The collaborative would focus on trust building with local government, community engagement and trainings, and developing healthy community plans for each community to identify needed investment. Next slide, please. So as you'll see, we have a really strong group of applicants that we have before us today. 2 of the 6 collaboratives are tribal-led, and across all of the recommended awardees, there are 25 tribal partners. 58 different organizations are represented across all 6 applications, and in total, the collaboratives cover 10 counties and serve 406 census tracts, 88% of which are under-resourced communities. Next slide, please. The total requested amount for our 6 top scoring applicants is just over 8.5 million, which, as I mentioned earlier, is a bit over the amount that we originally had in our NOFA. It's about $200,000 over. We'd like to pull this nominal difference from our $10 million appropriation for RCC round 2 in order to fully fund all 6 recommended awardees. Next slide, please. And in terms of next steps, I think we're really heartened and excited to see that there's been so much interest in the RCC program, but it's really unfortunate to be unable to fund so many strong proposals that we received. And so we're working on setting up debrief calls with applicants in the new year to provide feedback on their applications and get them set up for round 2. We'll also be launching capacity building and technical assistance in round 2 next year. And we are currently exploring opportunities to connect unsuccessful applicants to other potential funding opportunities as well. Next slide, please. And so with that, we'd like to recommend that the council approve staff recommendations for the first round of the Regional Climate Collaboratives program. Next, following Matt's reminder and public comment, we'd like to turn it over to Chair Assefa.
Great, thanks, Anna. So, council members, normally we take council comments first, then followed by public comments. But at the chair's discretion, I think I would recommend that we take public comments first on this one. It will be valuable for us to hear directly from people who will be impacted by this specific decision, and because it's a significant item that we're voting on. So without any objections, I would like us to take public comments on this item first.
Thank you, Chair Assefa. I'll begin the public comment period with in-person public comment and by reading the names of everybody who signed up for in-person public comment, which is 2 individuals for in-person public comment. When I call your name, if you could please approach the podium and prepare your comment. First is Rudy Ortega Jr. and then Kaylin Hammond.
Matt, just for President Ortega, Rudy Ortega.
Thank you. President Ortega.
Hello, thank you, Chairman Soda and council members for this time. This is a great honor to be presented and accepted to this final stage. It's 2 tribes in Los Angeles who have yet to achieve recognition, no fault to their own, but they're striving to build up in their communities. This is a really great precedent for us to build a toolkit that really guides us to find more funding for climate resiliency. With me, I have my Director of Tribal Historic Preservation Department and my Chief of Staff who would like to say a few words.
Yes, thank you very much. As Chief of Staff for the tribe, I appreciate that the tribe can use these resources to build capacity in the way that we need for supporting cultural preservation, which ultimately uplifts, protects, and promotes traditional ecological knowledges. We respond to over 80 requests a week, and for the last several decades, no one stopped to think, how do tribes have the capacity to staff and respond to all these consultation requests? So your funding allocation will change this process for the betterment of the tribe. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. The dictionary defines investment as investment of money with return on profit and material gains. I think with your investment, I'd like to ask that we add a definition of social return and collaborative gains through your investment. We're really looking forward for an opportunity for us in the region to work together, but we're also equally excited to be able to work with your staff, to work with all of you, and to work with all the awardees across the state to really formulate, and for us, to be able to be led by a tribe for tribes is extremely important. Thank you so much.
So with that, we conclude within 2 minutes. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Kaylin Hammond, followed by Tanya Dowsey.
Hi, my name is Kaylin Hammond with Leadership Council for Justice and Accountability, a community-based organization that works alongside communities in the San Joaquin and Eastern Coachella Valleys to advocate for healthy environments and equal access to opportunity. These 2 valleys are 2 of the regions hardest hit by climate change in California, while also dealing with ongoing environmental pollution from historic and contemporary environmental injustices. We applied for RCC grants in both regions, with both applications including a wide variety of community-led groups and other implementing partners. While our applications were 2 of the 12 finalists, neither was successful, replicating the historic exclusion of the regions we work in from climate investments, even though they're some of the hardest hit regions by drought, extreme heat, and other harsh climate impacts. Both of our applications were community-led, which is an important component of any climate-related project that claims to center impacted communities. We recommend that SGC post a full breakdown of the scoring of the selected applications to promote transparency in this process. Also, most of the awardees that were not tribal governments were either led by government agencies or had heavy involvement in government or business agencies. But in inland California, local government agencies often deprioritize climate change, particularly as it affects disadvantaged communities. So it's challenging to engage local government on climate justice focused projects. And if that's a requirement for a successful RCC application, it leaves communities like the ones that we partner with at a severe disadvantage. To ensure we are collectively taking steps to center racial equity and disadvantaged communities in decision-making and funding frameworks, it is imperative that community-led projects are given resources to build capacity. Communities know what they need to deal with the effects of climate change and mitigate climate change impacts, but their local knowledge and expertise are historically ignored. Thank you.
Thank you. Tanya Dowsey.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the council. Tanya Dowse. I'm with Siskiyou County Economic Development Council. We're a local nonprofit serving Siskiyou County, the farthest northern county in California. We're a vast and diverse county who also is comprised of some of California's smallest, most disadvantaged, and most under-resourced communities. This investment is extremely important to us. Our communities and our local economies are highly dependent on our working landscapes. In Siskiyou, we have been suffering for the last 10 years from increasing wildfire, drought, and floods. This climate crisis has rocked the very foundation of our communities and our local economies. And we are forced to adapt and evolve because of this situation. I just want to acknowledge the support that we received throughout this process from your extremely professional staff and the talented and encouraging consultants that worked with us. But I have to tell you, it was a heavy lift. So because of this exercise, we are already better for it. We've already established collaborations that didn't exist previously, and we've already thought differently and think about our future in a more positive way. And I just want to share with you, because of this investment, we are really committed to our path forward. We're committed to these collaborations, and we're committed to working to create capacity and resiliency. And we see a path towards a plan that allows us to adapt to our climate reality. Thank you.
That concludes the remote or the in-person public comment. We have five remote public comments, beginning with Melanie Smith.
Good afternoon. I'm Melanie Smith, Director of Regional Development at the Gateway Cities Council of Governments. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak to you this afternoon. The Gateway Cities COG was founded 25 years ago as a forum in which to bring together a disparate group of many small cities in order to amplify their voices on larger scale projects like transportation corridors that were in the past perceived to have been inflicted on their communities without their participation. The COG's policy priorities have expanded over the years to include not only transportation, but the intersecting issues of housing and homelessness, economic development, and air quality and climate. Our cities suffer from high pollution burden and the health and economic disparities that come in part from the infrastructure and industry that surrounds and cuts through our cities, but they haven't benefited to the extent that they should from the state cap and trade funding that should be available to address the issues they face. The opportunity to form a regional climate collaborative, engage with partners in our communities to build our capacity, and set the stage for an increase in funding for climate action seemed tailor-made for us, and we were so thrilled to hear about it from the Strategic Growth Council staff. The COG is the identified managing stakeholder for the Gateway Cities RCC, and our partners, the Sella Collaborative, Tree People, Grid Alternatives, and the LA County Office of Sustainability, express our great pride in being the highest scoring applicant recommended for full funding in the inaugural year of this new program. We know we're in good company with the other applicants. We appreciate that the Strategic Growth Council has recognized the need for a program like this and is also recognizing the merits of our partnership and application. If awarded, the RCC grant will enable Southeast LA County partners to collaborate in new ways with communities that have long been underserved in order to ensure that community design solutions to climate challenges are funded and implemented. We hope this funding is the catalyst for a sustainable initiative that can undertake a great deal of good work now and in the future in order to improve the quality of life for the residents of Southeast LA. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Next is Holly Nickel.
Good afternoon, Council. I'm Holly Nickel from the State of Equity team at the Public Health Institute. With a couple of my colleagues, I co-lead the Capital Collaborative on Race and Equity. We value both the regional climate collaboratives and transformative climate communities programs because they center community-anchored climate planning and solutions. The SGC is leading the way for other government agencies by bringing partners together across sectors to create sustainable change together with communities that bear the burden of the climate crisis. Communities know how they're impacted and they know what solutions best fit their context and needs, but many communities have difficulty accessing funds because of complex and cumbersome government processes and rules around funding. RCC and TCC show how government can partner with communities and model how grant making can be done in a much more equitable way. RCC and TCC also work hand in hand with communities to build their capacity and readiness to access additional funds, like the money coming from the Biden administration, which help our community tap into a huge opportunity for additional resources. Programs like TCC and RCC are worthwhile investment. We need more state level funding to contribute to these and similar initiatives that are really critical to California communities. Congratulations to the communities that will be awarded. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Kia Rivers.
Good afternoon. My name is Kaya Rivers, and I'm a policy advocate at Community Water Center. We appreciate the Strategic Growth Council for sponsoring the Regional Climate Collaborative Grant to accelerate climate resilience within disadvantaged communities. And we congratulate all of the finalists that had the honor of receiving this grant. Community Water Center, alongside other community-based organizations and research institutions, also applied for this grant as the San Joaquin Valley Climate Justice Collaborative and tied as runners-up. We are disappointed that the San Joaquin Valley Climate Justice Collaborative won't be sponsored by the Strategic Growth Council to promote climate resilience in these communities, and the Southern San Joaquin Valley region as a whole will miss out on this opportunity to advance climate resilience. There are many communities within the San Joaquin Valley that do not have access to the resources to ensure climate resilience, and many of these communities are already experiencing the effects of climate change. Disadvantaged communities within the San Joaquin Valley endure extreme heat and drinking water insecurity due to climate change and misuse of our natural resources. We ask that the disadvantaged communities in the San Joaquin Valley are prioritized in future Strategic Growth Council-sponsored climate resilience opportunities, as they are some of the communities most drastically impacted by climate change already, and the impacts will only deepen over the next decade. Thank you for your time, and thank you for the opportunity to provide comment today.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Shasta Goffin. Pardon me, Shasta Gone.
You. And thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. I am coming to you today from Payom Coachum Territory, San Diego County. I am the Environmental Director and Tribal Historic Preservation Officer for the Paula Band of Mission Indians. And I am here to represent the Southern California Tribal Chairmen's Association on behalf of our partners who are lucky enough to have been recommended for award for this grant opportunity to stand up an RCC in Southern California. I want to echo what some of the previous speakers have said in thanking the Strategic Growth Council and their staff for doing such a terrific job at supporting us and for your final recommendations. I also want to express my empathy to those who did not make it into the finalist group and echo their calls for more investment and more attention being given to other under-resourced communities. Tribes, of course, have been in this position since Father Sarah first stepped ashore in 1769 to establish Mission San Diego. And tribes are working together since that time to try to remedy the effects of colonialism, and that includes the effects of climate change. I will note that in many cases for tribes, when you don't have resources, it's hard to get resources. You need to have money to get money. And that's what this grant is going to allow us to do, is to help all of the member tribes of SCTCA to be able to develop climate resilience, have access to future funding, and to increase capacity for tribes. I'm hoping not just in Southern California, but ultimately throughout California and also all of the United States. So we are very honored to be in this select group and look forward to working with SGC moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Aaron Burnett.
Good afternoon, Council. As Canal Alliance's Director of Policy and Civic Engagement, I see the challenges of our limited capacity every day. Our goal is to be proactive in addressing root causes of disparities, and effective civic engagement and policy advocacy is critical to this effort. The communities we serve have been marginalized for decades, making them exceptionally vulnerable to crisis, whether it's housing, the economy, or climate. We've gotten used to reacting to crisis, but this limits our ability to organize and affect real change. Climate impacts will make it that much harder for us to focus effectively on serving our community and for families to access the services they need. Over the course of this selection process, I've seen the potential of our cross-sector collaborative, and it gives me great hope and optimism. This collaborative is a chance for us to learn from each other and to work together towards a common purpose for two of Marin's most marginalized communities on the front lines of sea level rise, to build more trust and solidarity. RCC will allow us to expand our program work and expertise in order to meaningfully address climate change issues as we partner with local government and regional partners to bring forth real and transformative climate justice. Thank you.
Thank you. Our last commenter on this item is Dr. Wilma Franco.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you so much. My name is Dr. Wilma Franco. I'm the Executive Director of the Stella Collaborative and a proud partner to the Gateway Calls proposal. As a collaborative, we're just thrilled and want to express our gratitude to the Strategic Growth Council for their leadership in creating opportunities like RCC to build capacity across California. As a collaborative, we are a network here in the Southeast region of LA County whose work aligns with RCC, given our belief that there is no one organization or entity that can really address these large societal challenges like climate change on their own. And we truly believe that this will require collective and collaborative cross-sector work in order to reach, some solutions, right, that are essentially grounded on community feedback. So we're very happy for this opportunity, very grateful for the work and the support of the staff and the consultants that you provided, because it really is about building that capacity for us to be able to really prioritize what our community wants to see in this region. So thank you for that, and we look forward to working in partnership with you.
Thank you. That concludes public comment on this item.
Great. Again, thank you for feedback and comments from the public. I know, some of the comments, this is a difficult because it's a wonderful, important program. Not everybody who applied got awarded. There's significant demand, but I just want to note that we will have another round of the same grant in 2023, I believe. So please stay tuned for that. We will now open it to council discussion. Before I go there, I know Secretary Castro Ramirez has left us, but Sasha Kurgan, Deputy Secretary, has joined us on her behalf, and Secretary Omashakan has left as well. I open it up to council comments, but I want to note that we are about 40 minutes behind. So if you keep your comments to 2 minutes, if you don't behave, I'll ask Matt to put up the timekeeper on the screen. But if you could keep your comments 2 minutes.
I have a very quick comment. I'll selfishly take a moment because I'm going to have to leave here as well, and we'll have Deputy Secretary D'Souza come up in my absence. I really want to thank everybody who applied to this program. Some of you may be aware I was here at Calipié as a deputy secretary, left for a bit, and then came back. And at the time in which I left, this was a program that was just getting started, and I'm really impressed by where we are now. The need is obviously great. I am just in awe of how many applicants we had, and I know this is a time of some not so happy fiscal outlooks in the next couple of years here, but just want to speak to the importance of this program. We're seeing so clearly that it is very needed. And I hope that in the next round, we could look to fill maybe some of the geographic gaps that we have as well. Just taking a look at some of the Southern San Joaquin Valley and seeing how we can fill that too and support some of the work there, and just really want to thank the staff for the work to develop this program and all of you who have applied and the award recipients. Thanks very much.
Great. Anyone else? No.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Councilor Carter.
Thank you. Just to quickly acknowledge the leadership of the SELA Collaborative down in Southeast Los Angeles under the amazing leadership of Dr. Wilma Franco. They had to do their own capacity building the old-fashioned way from the ground up and from the streets forward, and now they are a model for others to follow. Their 4-stage plan for community engagement. The local council of governments is turning to them for their leadership in putting that together. So it's a real testament to what perseverance and visionary leadership can do. I also wanted to congratulate, as a 5th-generation humble inhabitant of the greater Tovangar, to thank you for the opportunity to support your application. As you mentioned, through no fault of representatives, past or present, of indigenous peoples of Greater Los Angeles County, we have no federally recognized indigenous nations in Los Angeles County, which is, of course, a travesty. And there's recorded reasons why that remains the case. Essentially, broken promises that go back over a century, as we know. But I just wanted to congratulate you for your work, and also the other applicant team led by the Palo Band of Mission Indians, and also the Hoopa Valley that was awarded earlier today. Best of luck to you moving forward.
Anyone else from council members?
Just very quickly, again, thank you for being here, President, and for your leadership. It's really, we were talking about it with Secretary Crowfoot, and he was very saddened that he couldn't be with us today. So he sends his regards, and then again, for the opportunity to be with you again and have you here in Sacramento. Thank you for making the trip. And yes, of course, very similar to the comments said by Council Member Cardenas, is there's been a long history here, and it's nice to be able to be in a space where staff, leadership recognize that we must do better. And so again, the staff recommendation is a good one. But I do want to say that it is a good one and there's still a lot of need. And it is very, very clear today that there's a lot of historic inequities in California. There's a lot of challenges, and the amount of applicants, as shared before, is just a testament of how much more we need to do. And seeing the resolution passed on housing and knowing that we need to do better in coordinating, we also just need to acknowledge the fact that there's so many communities that are ready to take on this challenge and work with us and really seek additional funding. So again, thank you for those that are here and the provided public comment. Even though you may have not been recommended, know that there's staff here and there's leadership here that hears you and is willing to work with you moving forward. So thank you.
Great, thanks. And I echo those couple of comments around the magnitude of the problem, I mean, the need, but also I think staff's incredible work sorting through these applications and the recommendations, both in their geographic diversity, but the diversity of groups and programs as well. So kudos to that process. So with that, I would ask for my council members for a motion and a second to approve the staff recommendations for the Regional Climate Collaborative Round 1 Awards.
So moved.
Cardena. Second.
Second.
Deputy Secretary Kurgan. Second.
I think Secretary Ross was the first on the second. I don't know if you want to resolve.
Oh, okay. Sure.
Sounds good. Yeah.
Director Acefa?
Yes.
Deputy Secretary Kurgan?
Yes.
Councilmember Cardenas?
Yes.
Deputy Secretary D'Souza?
Yes.
Assistant Secretary Moreno Rivera?
Yes.
Deputy Director Radhakrishna?
Yes.
Secretary Ross?
Yes.
Deputy Secretary Musavi?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Great. Great, so we'll move to the next item, item 8. This is a policy discussion on the community resilience centers. Kieran and Coral Abbott, who's SGC's Community Resilience Centers Program Manager, will present, and then we'll have council discussion followed by public comments. Coral, take it away.
Wonderful. Do you want to go ahead?
Or Kieran.
No, go ahead, Coral.
Yeah.
Well, good afternoon, Chair Acefa and council members. My name is Coral Abbott, and I'm the Community Resilience Centers Program Manager. So today I'll be presenting 2 topics for consideration by the council as we continue to develop the first round of the Community Resilience Centers, or CRC, program guidelines. So I'll give a very high-level overview of the program and then move right into the discussion topics for today. But for anyone that would like more information on the program structure and design as currently proposed, please reference the staff report or the current draft guidelines out on our website. Next slide, please. So the Community Resilience Centers program will provide grants for funding for the construction or retrofit of facilities to serve as community resilience centers that mitigate the public health impacts of extreme heat and other emergency situations exacerbated by climate change. The program will do this by focusing on building resilience through physical infrastructure investments in these facilities, as well as through funding services and programs that help to build the social connection, knowledge, and resources that help build communities' resilience to any form of disaster. Next slide, please. Oh, I think I might have gone through this one as well. Next slide, please. So a couple of other important notes that will inform our discussion today is that statute requires that we prioritize projects located in and benefiting under-resourced communities, and that we prioritize geographic diversity, and so we'll discuss that in a moment. We're also wanting to make investments at locations or facilities that are trusted by vulnerable community members, such as community centers, schools, libraries, and places of worship. And then finally, in line with other SGC programs, we want to see how community input informed the project itself and how community members will be engaged moving forward. Next slide, please. So one important note as well is that we're requiring resilience centers to develop plans that lay out how they will function during both emergency and non-emergency times to ensure they're well equipped to handle disasters effectively, as well as to serve community needs year round. Next slide, please. So with that brief overview, I'm going to move into our policy discussion topics. Next slide, please. So the first question that we have for you all is whether we should only be funding proposals that equip communities to meet a multitude of emergency needs, or whether the program should also fund projects that are more limited in the scale of their emergency response potential. Next slide. So to provide some context, we're wanting to ensure that this funding to help communities we're using this funding to help communities respond to current climate impacts, but also to prepare for projected impacts that we know they're likely to face. So for this reason, in the draft, we proposed a wide range of functions and elements that resilience centers will need to be ready to provide, including ensuring 24/7 access in emergencies and having infrastructure to respond to a number of climate emergency scenarios. Next slide, please. The draft guidelines also propose a number of features that would allow resilience centers to effectively respond to short-term emergencies as well as longer-term emergencies. You can see some on this list, including backup power and water, shelter for people and animals, space for food prep and storage, showers, laundry. Next slide. So some potential challenges with taking this approach include that project locations that have been identified by communities might face size constraints that limit their ability to meet all of these requirements. And also there are communities that are dealing with immediate climate impacts that may see these additional requirements as a barrier as they're trying to triage immediate pressing impacts. Next slide. On the other hand, we do know that communities that may be facing one or two acute impacts in the moment are projected to face impacts of other climate-related events. And so this investment now could potentially support lower capacity communities to move from a state of current emergency response to build longer term emergency preparedness. Next slide, please. So then our second topic is what are the possible approaches to defining geographic diversity for the program? And then how should we reflect this in our program guidelines? As a reminder, statute calls for us to prioritize projects that represent statewide geographic diversity, inclusive of both rural and urban communities, and incorporated and unincorporated areas. While consideration is given in scoring to rural and unincorporated areas, the broader question of geographic diversity has not been answered. Next slide. So existing state programs and initiatives address this issue in a number of ways. Many directly define regions with very clear demarcations. A couple of examples include the Affordable Housing Sustainable Communities programs, whose regions are loosely based off of MPO regions with some differences. That's the first map on the left there. The Community Economic Resilience Fund program, which breaks the state down into regions based on a number of factors related to economic development, there in the middle. The fourth climate change assessment, which broke the state into regions based on a number of factors, including shared climate and ecosystems, broad economies and political boundaries. And then there's CalOES, that divides the state into 6 regions for fire and rescue, mutual aid, and local emergency planning. Other initiatives and programs like the Regional Climate Collaboratives program, I worked on that program and it still trips me up. But they take a broad approach to considering geographic distribution of awards as part of their review process without determining distinct regions in their guidelines. Given the focus for the program that we're talking about today, a factor that we may want to consider is the diversity of climate risks by ensuring that Round 1 funds projects that includes communities at high risk for extreme heat, drought, flooding, sea level rise, and wildfires, rather than leaning on specific regional boundaries or taking a very open-ended approach. I will note that in public engagement that we conducted to develop the guidelines, we did hear quite a lot of feedback around the importance of CRCs being able to be responsive to specific climate risks more than we did about specific geographies. So in evaluating these options, some give us much more flexibilities. Others would kind of take us down a more narrow approach, but trying to get your input today on how we can best do this, particularly in the first round, to fund a variety of projects across the state facing different risks. So with that, next, following Matt's reminder on public comment, we'd like to turn it over to Chair Acefa. And
Thank
then
you.
maybe we can land on that last slide. Perfect. Thank you.
If members of the public would like to comment on this item, please submit a public comment card at the front table. To make virtual public comment, please visit sgc.ca.gov/meetings and complete the public comment form. I will now pass it to Chair Acefa.
Great, thanks. Thanks, Coral, for that presentation. I will now open it up for council comments
Chair.
and discussion. Yes.
I would
Secretary
really
Ross.
enjoy the opportunity to talk about this because it's so important. And we've been grappling with some of this. We have in the state of California, it's very unique to the state of California, our state-owned fairground facilities. And many people locally think of fairgrounds as that's the fair. And over time, we have, because of lack of funding, we forced them to be much more self-sufficient and be much more community-oriented. But there's still facilities that the state owns. And as we have seen, because they are embedded into most local as well as OES emergency response, they are the first place to call. They are not the only place to go to. But there are some things to consider in this, and that is, especially in remote areas that may not have even a real village, there may not be other facilities. And so access and where vulnerable populations are is going to be very important. We have really tried to focus any funding we've gotten in recent years, including by coincidence, because we don't all get to see each other's BCPs until they're out there. We had Community Resilience Fairgrounds, and then OPR had Community Resilience Strategic Growth Council. We have really tried to focus on what we have witnessed and what we know going forward is going to be more frequent evacuations, longer periods of time for evacuation, the need for everybody to bring, if they can get out with one thing, it's the computer and their phone, so they have connectivity, those charging facilities, backup, energy. I mean, it's so holistic. And so we've really focused on better bathroom facilities, shower facilities, commercial kitchens, and really thinking about, by doing that, we are creating better year-round community hubs to really think about economic development opportunities. Many of them already host weddings and quinceaneras and wakes and all those kinds of things. But really, what would really make it a more vibrant? Some have childcare facilities on site, but really trying to think that through. And if we're investing in those facilities, we don't want to be duplicating things. But I say this because it's almost like we have to have two tracks. One are those larger, full service community resilience centers, but then thinking about a library or a community hall that with just some minimal improvements would be more accessible, where transportation needs to be considered as an emergency and resilience center, and thinking about almost like there's one that's not full scale, but it serves a very important community organizing center and things like that. So I'm not going to give you any answers. I just want to make sure that we think about investments that have already been made in state facilities that are already embedded into emergency response, that we don't just move ahead without taking those kinds of things into consideration, and where it might make sense that they could be eligible to do this work. But more importantly, they're not exclusive to other scale size facilities, and taking into mind the vulnerable populations that may need something slightly less than the full service type of a resiliency center. Thank you.
Thank you. Some great feedback. I think the comments around this response emergency centers actually becoming sort of transformational community building centers, because during disasters, people come together for the first time, see their neighbors that they've never seen before. That, unintended benefit is, I think, huge, and embedding that in a way that the places can actually support that kind of community building, especially in rural areas and where people don't have that access. I think that's a great comment. Sure.
Not to disagree with Secretary Ross about maybe the utility of identifying using a map that identified these particular fairgrounds. That seems very intuitive to me. I'm curious though, if the criteria were to provide multiple possible services, would these venues then have the capacity to do so? Certainly my preference was, given the limited amount of resources, to try to be competitive, doing as much possible as could be done in these facilities under these circumstances, whether it's a cooling or hydration or some other disaster might hit that area. How would whatever people would go to, whatever center would be located or identified through whatever map is finally determined, that it had the capacity to deliver more than one or two critical services. So that's sort of, my intuition was toward the SURF sort of map, because several of us have been part of some grants through the governor's wonderful vision and generosity with the P16 collaboratives of 250 million. And so I've already seen the aggregation of people trying to work together based on that sort of regional map. So that's what I was thinking, although I will just say this as a plug for the fairgrounds. When COVID hit in our part of the inland California, northern San Joaquin Valley, and we had very limited vaccine, it was at the fairground that it was administered, because it was precisely, to the Secretary's point, the place that people knew to go to, and generational awareness of that particular facility. So I certainly, and then living in West Texas, right? The fair is a big deal. So everyone sort of knows where it's at. I like the idea of the utilization of some kind of generationally known facility of confidence like that. If there was a way to gently sort of combine that with maybe the SURF structure, which a lot of people are telling me they're becoming familiar with, and they like that SURF cooperation that this P16, at least that particular grant opportunity, has really catalyzed a much wider kind of partnership than, at least in our part of the San Joaquin Valley, than people are saying had existed in the past. So how do we take advantage of that kind of cooperation, new cooperation that the governor has catalyzed for this kind of purpose, and maybe some kind of facility like a fairground?
Deputy Director Radhakrishna.
Thank you. To build off this, and I want to thank Coral for naming social connection as a key part of what we're trying to drive during emergencies and all year round, and to build off of. The two words and phrases I want to leave us with thinking about are trust and community-informed future fitting. If you build it, they will come. If you build it, they will come. Well, maybe not, if it's not a trusted site. I've been a local health officer during power shutoffs and extreme heat and wildfire smoke. And I've been in those rooms with the GIS maps up and thinking about the Rolodex of the assets and where people may go and they may not go there if there's not cultural accessibility, linguistic accessibility, physical transportation accessibility. So that intergenerational trust that Chancellor mentioned is so important. So thinking about trust, which we learned from the pandemic, was as a key measure. I'm still going to community vaccine events, not in clinics, but in community trusted sites. And some of those sites may not be able to meet the need of every hazard now and in the future. And so maybe most or the most selective ones for that region, but not all. We may kick some off the list if we expect them to address everything over the next century. But if we make it regional, and some overlap, fire, wildfire, flooding, sea level rise, but maybe not all of them, then we could actually use our resources more to go further and strategically across the state. I also just want to name, this really fits with modern thinking around pre-hazard mitigation, which is really a prevention strategy. We know it's going to increase in frequency and intensity, and so being prepared ahead of time, but supplementing those existed trusted sites rather than building more and bigger necessarily. When it comes to your second question about geographical diversity, you mentioned a few of the maps. There's others and ways, the fourth assessment, you can divide up the state using a lot of different ways, and that doesn't always get at equity. We heard some public comment for item number 7 from Kayla that maybe communities' needs from a risk perspective weren't absolutely centered or prioritized in the quantitative way. So we believe from our agency that looking at socioeconomic and climate risk is more important, and there's ways to address diversity through that. You could have certain quotas, like for unincorporated areas, a couple, rural, a couple, tribal, a couple, but not a particular regional map, which is scattered and changing and different based on the sector that it comes from. And if you really use prioritization tools like we did during the pandemic, the Healthy Places Index, the Climate Change Vulnerability Index, you can really quantify sociodemographic risk along with climate risk and still have some quotas to make sure we get geographical distribution. So I leave us thinking about trust and community-informed future fitting. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Rohan, for your comments, because as I was reviewing our agency's notes, there's a alignment in what you've just shared, and I do want to touch on several other elements, which is some considerations for this program. And I'll first start with energy resilience. So being mindful of including solar installations, renewable energy generation, building efficiency and envelope strengthening, education on rebate and assistance programs. On the water resilience side, including water efficiency and conservation activities, drought tolerant landscaping and education on these activities as well. On nature-based solutions, and food security, including community greening, vegetation management, defensible space, community gardens, and training and education on these activities. As you see, there's an educational component on all of these. On workforce development, right? Education and training, including certification and job training, outdoor workers' rights and protections in the context of climate impacts, business incubation and leadership development for a carbon neutral future. Then, of course, really thinking about a minimum funding target for California Native American tribes to increase resilience of tribes. On heat, this is one of those things that we were really thinking of, right? Our extreme heat action plan, the state of California's extreme heat action plan, it really highlights the fact that heat ranks amongst the deadliest of all climate hazards in California and across the United States. And heat waves in cities are projected to cause 2 to 3 times more heat-related deaths by the mid-century, right? So when we really think about this, and we've been talking about seeing it through an equity lens and through an environmental justice lens, then we really see that climate vulnerable communities will experience the worst of these effects, right? And so as you're looking at your guidelines, as you're looking at this program, is we really want to make sure that this is reinforced. And for people with limited or no access to cooling or shade, extreme heat can be dangerous, even deadly. For this reason, we recommend we pay closer attention as to how proposed guidelines can incorporate the level of attention merited to communities most vulnerable to extreme heat. On the action on geographic considerations, there's some really great ideas, right? And there's already structures in play. And so we also recommend that you do not develop a new set of regions, and that there's already some great examples that were shared by our colleagues, and that you also really leverage existing regional breakdowns, the climate assessment for a broad approach. And that funded projects should reflect urban and rural areas, a spread of regions. But again, going back to Rohan's comments as to really looking of the vulnerabilities and in each of the different regions and how that itself, trying to capture any and all could also be a hindrance. Yeah, thank you.
Good comments. Shri.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks so much, Coral, for the overview. And I fully agree with the previous speaker, so I'll keep my comments short. To me, this is a really innovative, groundbreaking program, and we don't have a lot of precedent we can look to from other states or other jurisdictions. So I think we're going to have to iterate over time. And so specifically on that first question of should the centers cover all climate risks, or should we take a more inclusive approach? I think we're going to have to make a decision and then revisit that decision over time after we go through a first round, after we see the kinds of applications that come in. I would suggest starting with a more inclusive approach. So allowing applicants to decide if they want to focus on all types of risks or really limit the focus. And then, be clear in our communication about the program that we might have to revisit the guidelines over time. Thanks.
We are so polite going down the row right now. The secretary and I were chatting about this, and since it's the first round, I think kind of similar to the deputy secretary's comment, considering what kind of principles might be helpful right now, and I know you're hearing a lot of voices, so Coral, I know you're going to be able to land this, but here we go. So more on the guiding principles frame, and maybe not to your questions, apologize for that, but keeping in mind simplicity, especially for the applicants. And to Shireen's point, we expect that we're going to learn a lot from this first round of funding. And yes, to iteration. With that simplicity, I'd also like to suggest maybe considering what we've done in the SALC program in the most recent guidelines and considering the portfolio approach instead of a project by project approach to allow for our second principle, flexibility. Knowing that communities vary in size, need, and capacity, and you've already heard that. So again, that I think goes back to the need for simplicity here. If communities are already expressing some barriers, whether it be accessing space or being able to land something that checks every box, let's not create an additional barrier, but instead let's see what's possible. I really appreciate the social vulnerability comments that our team here has made today. We've been doing that in our other programs as well. So I think you're hearing a lot of support for that. And so hopefully that helps on the geographic side. Also, we want to think about, and I think this gets to Secretary Ross's point, how flexibility could allow communities to leverage other investments in their communities. So for example, are there opportunities to co-locate the CRCs in developments? And of course, I'm thinking about housing. I'm thinking about ground floor community space that may be underutilized right now. And so I think a strong signal to communities that we're open to seeing what that would look like. And that could get kind of co-location, some of the principles that we're hearing. And then the last thing, our theme would be sustainability, and not expecting that this is all worked out now, but we're curious about the vision for the long-term sustainability of the CRCs. And I think that may inform some of the program design as well, because I couldn't get a sense of how long we're able to support operations. I do think that once we get community centers built, they are a community fixture, but let's make sure that it's treated with the respect and support for longevity that helps us achieve the outcomes that we're trying to get. So those are our themes. Thank you so much.
Anyone else? So
yeah, there's no one to my right. So
yeah,
I've just consulted with all of my agencies, and so I got nothing. When I first thought about this, Coral, I thought that geographic, setting aside geographic, parameters and look at existing modes and cookie cutter constructs, and then I thought that maybe that's elevating form over substance just a little bit too much, and so a point that was made by is it Deputy Secretary Radhakrishnan or Deputy Director?
Deputy Director Rohan.
Brother Rohan. Social equity concerns, and then also, secondly, but not secondarily, just in terms of, I guess, our risk analysis. There's likelihood of something happening, and then there's the magnitude of that which might happen. And so, from that kind of a perspective, where are the types of areas where we would expect to see, bad things to happen? And because we live in California, that's like, everywhere. So because of that, I mean, we're talking about the effects of increasing heat across greater swaths of California. We're talking about possibly more and more wildfires. The San Andreas and related tributaries aren't going anywhere. So there's and now, according to UCLA, we could have a massive flood in LA because of the Air River phenomenons and the way that dynamism, that particular implication of global warming is playing out in our part of the world. And so the point I'm getting at is that it seems to me that it might be a little narrow-sighted to establish guideline parameter that elevate those which are looking at a particular type of calamity and community response, when because of where we live and when we are existing and what we've done to the planet, there are a whole lot of things that we are justifiably concerned about, and so hopefully should be planning for. And so I might suggest, again, with the absence of any agencies informing me what might be a better way to go, that maybe we should plan for more than one or two things to befall us.
Well, I will sort of conclude hearing, a number of the really, really constructive feedback. It sounds a bit daunting, Coral, but I think there is some consistency there. So on the first question, the idea of simplicity but also be open to, be more inclusive in the upfront might be a good idea, but with some kind of guardrails. What I mean by guardrails is I completely agree that if it's trying to do everything, every possibility, then the chance of failure is increased, especially when you start thinking about sustainability over time. So some kind of a healthy combination of both the simplicity, but be open to sort of flexible approaches. And those guardrails could be the nuances of the different contexts within California. So not every need is going to be the same. So is there a way that it could be tailored in terms of whether you cover every possible scenario versus just limited? Not every jurisdiction has the same kind of risk or the same kinds of risk. So is there a way that can inform it? I think some humility would be good in this as well, because this has never been done before. So it's fine. We come back in a year or 2 years or whenever, that we adjust that as we do in a number of other things. The second question, the geographic area is always, from what I know, especially in this state, with whether it's SURF, the climate program, housing, it is a contentious process, rightfully so, because it's really difficult to divide things geographically when some of the issues, the specific issues, don't lend themselves to that. But what I'm hearing is really don't reinvent the wheel, but also learn from what has already been done. For me, I feel like the Cal OES geographic area, because it is primarily focused on disaster response, would be a good place to start, and then figure out all the other sort of specific local related issues, trusted places or tried and true facilities, but very specific to that region. I know it's going to be a lot of work on sort of pulling all this together, but my sense is, starting with a Cal OES makes sense because it is about disaster response. And I'm pretty sure they've debated all of these issues when they're developing that, but also they're informed by the data of where the disasters are taking place from, especially climate change. And they take equity into consideration as well, because places that have the most impact in the most disaster areas also happen to be the ones that have less infrastructure, less invested in. So I hope that helps. But I think really appreciate my colleagues' very constructive feedback, because these are going to be really important places and transformative places, potentially if they're done right, not just emergency response. So with that, we'll open it up to public comments.
Thank you, Chair. I'll begin the public comment period with in-person public comment. We have one individual signed up for in-person public comment. That is Olivia Seidemann.
Hello, my name is Olivia Seidman, Climate Policy Coordinator with Leadership Council for Justice and Accountability. First, I want to thank the SGC CRC program staff for their hard work and dedication to meaningful stakeholder and community engagement in the development of this program, evidenced by the clearly thoughtful and comprehensive draft program guidelines. Many of the residents that Leadership Council works alongside have expressed deep needs for community resilience centers in their communities. In Lanier, an unincorporated community in Fresno County, and in North Shore, an unincorporated community in the eastern Coachella Valley, residents have organized robust campaigns to get local and state funding for CRCs. In the interest of creating as equitable a program as possible, we strongly urge that the program definitions be as expansive as possible to allow for different types of CRCs feeding the needs of different communities be eligible for funding under the CRC program guidelines. The draft guidelines require very specific requirements for all community resilience centers, including laundry, a backup water source, and more. We strongly urge SGC to be more flexible in the mandated requirements, ensuring that projects are evaluated based on community needs, not on a pre-written list of requirements. This is especially crucial as rural unincorporated communities are often isolated from resources and services that urban areas may have access to, such as basic medical services, pharmacies, emergency food pantries, and more. Disadvantaged rural communities such as North Shore and Lanier are already facing some of the worst impacts of the climate crisis and must be able to provide critical resources during climate emergencies. They're deserving of funds to equip them to be able to do so, even if they may not be able to offer certain functions such as overnight access. A one-size-fits-all model would be prohibitive, especially if required functions might not fit community needs. For example, rural communities often have impacted water sources due to ongoing effects of drought caused by the climate crisis and may not be able to maintain a backup water supply at all times. Additionally, the required compliance with local emergency plans could be difficult in jurisdictions where plans are out of date or non-compliant with applicable California law. We recommend that the emergency plan be developed by the community during the planning and implementation process. These are a few examples of why flexibility in guideline requirements is imperative to ensuring equity in the CRC program. Second, I know I'm out of time, but very quickly, just
Olivia, if we can have your final thoughts.
Okay, just regarding geographic diversity, we do support the current extra points to unincorporated and rural communities as modeled and invite y'all to come out to Lanier.
Thank you very much. We'll move to virtual public comment, beginning with Veronica Cole.
Good afternoon, honorable members of the California Strategic Growth Council. My name is Veronica Cole, and I am a Resilient Communities Analyst with the City of Oakland. The Community Resilience funding is appreciated as cities like Oakland are investing heavily in building resilience in our communities. The City of Oakland's 2030 Equitable Climate Action Plan identifies ambitious actions the city can take to combat climate change, while also ensuring that those who have been harmed by environmental injustice and who are likely to be hurt first and worst by the impacts of climate change will benefit first and foremost from climate action. It prioritizes the establishment of 3 municipal resilience hubs to build climate and community resilience through both shocks and stressors. Oakland has identified 3 neighborhoods to receive resilience hubs and is engaged in equity-based partnerships to collaboratively design and develop the hubs. Sea level rise will increase flooding in West Oakland and East Oakland, communities that are predominantly African American and Latino. Heat impacts will be most severe in areas with low tree canopy coverage and for those in substandard housing. Lower income residents tend to have less access to cars and reliable transit, which affects their ability to evacuate in times of disaster. Having fewer financial resources results in greater challenges to recovery after a crisis occurs. Seniors in these communities are even more vulnerable due to the presence of air pollution, which can aggravate heart disease and stroke, lung diseases such as chronic obstructive pulmonary disease and asthma, and diabetes. This funding would support projects such as the creation of a resilience hub at Lincoln Recreation Center in Oakland's Chinatown district, a project with substantial community support and where one census tract shows that 40.9% of residents are over the age of 65. Resilience hubs will also be an asset in a major earthquake, which is predicted in the next 30 years along the Hayward Fault. Oakland has frontline communities located in areas subject to liquefaction. Thank you, and that concludes my comments.
Thank you. Our next comment is from Enrique Huerta. Enrique, are you with us?
Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you. You may begin your comment.
Thank you. Again, my name is Enrique Huerta, Legislative Director at Climate Resolve, a Los Angeles-based nonprofit working to create just and resilient communities to extreme heat. Thank you, Chair Acefa and members of the council for taking on this climate resilience and public health challenge. Major props to Coral Abbott, too. Climate Resolve likes that extreme heat and public health are central to this program as stipulated in the codified language of SB 155 and AB 211. As Councilmember Moises mentioned, extreme heat kills more Californians than all other climate hazards combined, and community resilience centers could go a long way to curb mortality. The culprit that amplifies extreme heat deaths is the urban heat island effect, which disproportionately affects communities of color. Climate Resolve supports finding a balance between funding rural and urban communities, but recognizing that according to the California's Fourth Climate Change Assessment, 95% of California's population reside in cities. Thank you, Chair and members of the council for your attention on this matter.
Thank you. Our last comment on this item comes from Alan Abbs.
Good afternoon, Chair Acefa and members of the council. My name is Alan Abbs. I'm the legislative officer for the Bay Area Air Quality Management District. In 2019, the AQMD sponsored AB 836 from Assemblymember Wicks, which created the Clean Air Centers for Vulnerable Communities pilot program. It received 1 year of funding and then was subsequently rolled into the SGC's Community Resilience Center program. AB 836 was introduced in response to the wildfires of 2018, which blanketed the Bay Area in smoke for 2 straight months, where a large percentage of low-income housing does not have proper filtration and ventilation. Regarding topic number 1, the AQMD recommends the Strategic Growth Council allow for proposals that may not meet comprehensive emergency needs, but rather provide more focused resilience resources. In our work developing the Clean Air Center concept with the help of municipalities, community groups, and nonprofits, we found it to be important to identify potential clean air centers that were already known to the community and were likely to be used by the community, such as libraries and community centers. In many cases, conversion to a cost-effective clean air center could be accomplished equipment-wise with large portable devices rather than expensive HVAC replacements. By allowing for proposals to meet a single critical need, such as air filtration and ventilation, resilience center funding could cost effectively meet immediate gaps in their community specific needs, even if they don't provide for things like overnight stays. Thank you for the opportunity to comment, and we look forward to participating in the program.
We had one additional commenter sign up, Louis Blumberg.
Hello.
Louis, we can hear you. You may begin your comment.
Thank you. Yes. My name is Louis Bloomberg. I'm a senior climate policy advisor to the Adrian Arsh Rockefeller Foundation Resilience Center at the Atlantic Council. I want to thank Ms. Abbott for the incredible work that she and her team have done to prepare the draft guidelines. There's been a lot of great comments today that I fully agree with. I just want to emphasize the comment that this is a new program, this is a new construct, and it grew out of the Chicago heat wave of 2006, where 2 different zip codes, 2 different communities had a very different outcome in terms of death. There were a lot of deaths in one community and none in another, and it was social cohesion that really made the difference. People checked on their neighbors that were homebound, and this is one of the exciting parts about this program. It can build social cohesion by providing community resilience centers that have ongoing programs continuously, so people are connected to the community center. So when a heat wave comes, they have a place that they're comfortable going to. In terms, I will just talk about the questions that Ms. Abbott posed. I think if you look at the language of the bill, it talks about extreme heat and mitigating public health impacts. I think the answer is you have to go with the open, the flexible, the small scale projects like the one in the example in a rural community that has a heat and air quality problem. And over time, you can build to the larger scale, more fully equipped centers, but there will be issues of scale there. And you'll have to reconcile that with the notion that this is a community-driven process. Finally, I think there's potential for synergy with CDFA. As Secretary Ross talked about, they're developing resilience centers. And so there could be some geographic collaboration on that to spread the funds out. So we look forward to filing comments as the process goes forward. And thank you for the opportunity today.
Thank you. That concludes public comment on this item.
Great. No, a lot of great constructive feedback, both from the public and from here at the dais. So thanks, Coral, for this work. Now they will take us to our last item on the agenda, which is the public comment period. Council will listen to these comments for matters that are not on the agenda. Unfortunately, this is not a forum for dialogue with the council members. Questions posed and during this public comments cannot be substantively addressed or discussed at this time, but Kieran and staff will take your comments and questions and will follow up as necessary and connect you to the relevant stuff for more. So with that, Matt, we can start public comments.
We'll begin with virtual public comment. We have 2 virtual public commenters on matters not on the agenda. First is Michelle Rousey.
Hello, Michelle Rousey, consumer disability advocate. There's so many issues that I want to bring up, but I'll only bring up a few. Transportation and housing is a hub for being able to live in the community when you have a disability. And I like that you're making initiatives but we need to have it as a priority. Without housing and transportation, we're not able to get to doctors and other resources in our community. And too many times, transportation initiatives and policies are not funded so that those initiatives can go forward and make beneficial change in the community. I just want to make sure that and I know that you heard us earlier today when we spoke about making sure that the voice of the disability community is heard and that we have resources on your group that we can connect with so that you hear the voices of the community and their needs. Housing, transportation are just a few of them. And you know, there's so much going on in my own community with not having enough housing, and without that housing, we don't have access to other community-based services that we need to be able to live in the community. And I would hope that you would reach out to disability community and other people so that we can make sure that you hear our voices and that's an ongoing thing and not just an afterthought. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next comment is from Tien Tran.
Hi, Tien Tran with Community Water Center. I would like to provide an update on the revised groundwater sustainability plans for the Kings, Cahuilla, and Tule subbasins in the San Joaquin Valley that were submitted to DWR in September. DWR is currently reviewing the plans, and we have shared our recommendations with them. We feel it is important for state leaders and the public to be aware of what's at stake with sustainable groundwater management, given that climate change impacts water supply and quality. Drinking water in the Central Valley and on the Central Coast are on the line. SGMA requires GSAs to consider all beneficial users of water and especially calls out disadvantaged communities and domestic well owners for protection. In short, GSAs must consider drinking water needs. However, we found 4 main gaps where the revised plans do not protect drinking water. 1, groundwater thresholds will allow thousands of wells to fail or become contaminated. 2, mitigation programs, which are meant to protect domestic wells, are insufficient because they do not provide clear commitments. And 3, monitoring networks continue to be small and lack data on vulnerable communities. 4, climate change analyses is limited and overly optimistic. And lastly, public engagement has been and continues to be limited in a way that will not ensure community voices are heard in the process. We recommend that SGC support DWR in protecting drinking water in SGMA implementation. In our view, DWR should determine the plans inadequate and send it to the state board for the probationary process. If we do not, it will fall on the state and GGRF funded programs like SAFER to try to keep up with the aftermath of dry, contaminated wells after families have lost access to water. Groundwater sustainable agencies need to budget for the true needs of their basins. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes public comment on matters not on the agenda.
Great. So that brings us to meeting adjournment. I really want to thank SGC staff, the public who participated, and council members for really robust conversation, transformative decisions that we've made here, and a lot of the really constructive feedback on the programs and policies that we're pursuing moving forward. I would like to wish everyone a happy holiday and safe season. We are in that time of the year, and we will see you next year. So with that, this meeting is adjourned.